Sorry, Holly.
Holly, I'm the designee for Secretary Rebecca Pepper.
Beth Cassoni, Executive Director, Massachusetts Lobstermen's Association.
John Regan, Director of Policy and External Affairs, New Bedford Port Authority. I'm here in place of Florida and who's at a conference. What's that?
Roger Berkowitz, President of the Massachusetts Seafood Club.
Abby Full with the Consensus Building Institute. And just one note, we're gonna send around an attendance list for everyone here. It's part of the fire emergency safety needs of the building.
Okay, Patrick Field, CBI facilitator. Let's go around the room, then I'm gonna come back to online. So Bradley.
Bradley Morgan with the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Wendy B. Hardy-Wills, Division of Marine Fisheries.
Story Reed, the Deputy Director with the DMF.
Sabathia Ray, Taken, Deputy Commissioner of DFP.
Brad Schalmeyer, Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries. Bob Glenn, Deputy Director, Division of Marine Fisheries.
Susanna Altenwald with the Logan French, living on most of the last, this is 52. You folks are back with a 31-year-old fishing peak frozen in time, no.
Julia Longer, Commissioner Director of the ML.
All right, folks online, I'm gonna call out a few names in particular, and then we'll go from there. So in terms of, Frank, do you want to introduce yourself?
Frank Morachi, I'm a retired fisherman. I'm now associated with the local Catch 143 nonprofit organization.
Great, Frank, thanks for joining us. Aubrey Church.
Good morning, Aubrey Church, Fisheries Policy Director with the Cape Cod Commercial Fishermen's Alliance.
Great, and Ed Barrett. Ed, I think you're there. Ed, can you hear us? No? All right, and then Eric Hansen.
Good morning, everyone. Eric Hansen, commercial scout vessel owner and also the president of the Fisheries Survival Fund.
Great, okay, good. And I just want to note there's a few others. Bonita will be joining us from the Department of Agricultural Resources, and we're excited to have her. She'll be presenting later. And I also just know we've got Jared Silva from DMF. I think we have Lisa Engler from Mass CEC, Melanie Griffin from Mass DMF, and Todd Callahan from CZM, and Tyler Solu from CZM as well. And we have other members of the public, so delighted to have you all.
I think Allison's online now.
And Allison, do you want to say hi? She's also driving.
Good morning, all.
Okay, and Allison, we'll get her in real life, in real person, and actually
Good
legible.
morning, would you be able to hear me?
Not that well, but we'll see you in just a few.
Would you advise people to make every effort to project?
Yes. Make every effort to project so the owl will capture your important words.
Not owl, owl.
Owl. I don't know, was that?
That's owl.
Owl
That's
and
the
owl. Owl and owl.
I can't hear either.
Was that my Colorado accent? I don't know what that accent was. Anyway, sorry, owl. Project for the owl. Owl. Yes, a distinguished struggle. Okay, moving on. So a quick review of the agenda. We have a lot of updates. We also want to spend some time talking about the role and purpose of the commission as we go forward. So we're going to do that a little bit towards the end. But we've got a number of updates on ports, which we'll talk about. Really appreciate Frank being here to talk about some issues around flounder that we want to raise with the commission. We're going to talk about offshore wind in a variety of ways with Brad and myself. And then we're going to cover some other issues. Bonita's going to talk about the USDA export grants because you all asked for an update from Ag. And the commissioner's going to talk about also a related thing, which is the Massachusetts Biodiversity Plan, which was recently released as well. And then we're going to really talk at the end about kind of where to and what we want to do here. We do owe a report to the legislature, I think the end of the year, or the beginning of the next, I can't remember which.
Oh, it's an annual report. I think it's sometime in 2026.
Okay. So we want to think about what you all want to report at that point, and also kind of where we can focus and be meaningful in terms of the impact of the commission. All right, so that is our plan. Any questions about the agenda?
I'll just note, there's no break currently listed, but we will find time to take a break.
We promise. Yeah. There's plenty of months. So, all right. Then let me just go to the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, hearing no additions or corrections to the minutes, we'll consider them approved. Okay, very good. All right, Ed, I just want to check your sound one more time. Ed, try to see if you can just introduce yourself. I can see you. Yeah. And then, there we go. And I can, it's somehow you're quiet. Turn up your volume. Oh, Ed, try that. No, can't hear you. Ed, if for some reason we can't get the volume to work for you, you can use chat at any time. We'll just try to monitor that, okay? All right, Ed, your hand's raised. I can see that. Okay. All right, while we do that, Jackie, do you want to just introduce yourself? We're just getting started. Thank you for making the drive.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am Jackie Odell. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Seafood Coalition, who was stuck in random roads on Reading this morning. I'm sorry, I'm a few minutes late.
Random roads in Reading.
There was an accident.
It has a ring to it.
So it routed me a very random location.
was
But
rerouted.
495 was wonderful.
She was rerouted in roads randomly in Reading. There's a lot of R's.
Good to see everyone.
And Jack, please feel free to.
Vito's right behind me.
Okay, Peter will be here as well at some point. Okay, well, you got here first, so you win. Okay, all right. So first, I want to hear some updates on port. So I'm going to turn to Story, who's going to give us an update on the port study. So, and both when you present, if you want to come to the table, would be much appreciated so we can hear you. So feel free to grab a chair where there's.
Yeah, great. Timing wise, since this meeting was postponed in September, we've actually made quite a bit of progress in the past few weeks on the port profile project. So you'll remember this is a redo of a report we did about 5 years ago on fishing, kind of commercial fishing industry infrastructure in every municipality in Massachusetts. So looking at, and also looking at the landings data for each of those ports. So since the focus group of the Commercial Fisheries Commission got together to help with this, we have given that feedback to Urban Harbors Institute at UMass Boston, who's now under contract to do this report for us again. So they've been incorporating that feedback into the surveys, and there are two. There's a Harbor Master survey, and there's a commercial fisher survey. So we at DMF have met with Urban Harbors about that twice in the past couple of weeks, and those surveys are nearly in final draft form. And so I'm hopeful that I can call on the focus group again, Beth and Gordon and Aubrey and Ed, to preview those surveys. So essentially help with a, kind of a test run of those, just the four of you and some other folks that we have, make sure those surveys flow. They're not too long, not too short, et cetera. So I think we've really improved on those since 5 years ago, for sure. I mean, it was great to start with that. We didn't have to start from scratch. We could just improve. So that test survey for you folks would be in a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and I'll give you a heads up. Once that's done and we're comfortable with the surveys and the format, we hope to get them out this fall. So the timeline, which is the next slide, is to get these surveys out in the fall. And I know we had talked about this. I mean, Beth, you had mentioned it would be great to have them available at your annual weekend. Let's see, if this goes well and the response is good, we might be, we might put a lid on the surveys then. But if any opportunities that we can have to leverage groups like you, if you have a delegates meeting, whatever it is, any groups that have meetings between now and then that people can think of, we'll get the survey there. We'll do the outreach there.
I just think using the annual weekend, you get more than just lobstermen there. You get a lot of fishermen's people.
when is that?
It's the end of the month. It's
End
End of January.
end of, yeah, end of January, sorry.
So it may work, but if we get a really good response, you know, we may feel comfortable. But that's kind of the very end of the window to do that, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, we're really good on the timeline. We want to have this report out in the spring and we're on schedule. So we're working on it. I have a few things starred on this timeline, like survey outreach and report outreach. The reason I started those is because those are areas where I definitely think this group can help out to help us do that outreach and get the word out.
Able to send it out with permit renewals too?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's gonna be, first, it will be an email blast to all of our permit holders, and we can do that multiple times. And then we can put a reminder in with the renewals, if that should be kind of prime time for it. So it's a good idea.
Yeah, what we find is when somebody promotes cooperation with the survey, like Uncle Dave at MLA, it made a huge difference. We had a survey years ago of, you know, ghost Leo loss and stuff. Because he really worked the group, that made a difference. And just if I could follow up on, for the members of this team who may not be totally familiar with this project. It's designed to give a complete overview of the commercial fisheries, you know, landings, et cetera, in ports and all that. But then there's a little chapter on every community's commercial fishing activity, number of permits, trends. And then what Story's talking about is then what are the needs of the port? Like what are the fishermen feel that there are needs? Harbor master might feel there are needs, and we've had a lot of good feedback from the users of those reports who have then taken it to their select board or the finance committee, or use that information to apply for grants to enhance infrastructure within the port. And so, you know, it's a great report. It's dated at this point, it's 5 years old, so that's why we'll be doing it. And it's being paid for by the seafood marketing program funds.
And one improvement that we're making, which maybe the harbor masters won't be so excited about when they have to do it, but we're asking them to fill out a survey, basically most of the survey for each of the harbors city, right? So Barnstable, or if there's commercial activity in those harbors, you know, Rockport has 3 little ones, you know. So that's, the fisheries data is still wrapped up to the municipal level, but we're asking them to look at each of the individual ports, so we'll see how that goes. We wanted to get a little bit more specificity there, and that came from feedback that people gave.
Ed, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, it's not so much a question, but yeah, well, I guess it is a question. In the harbor master surveys, are you asking, I think it's an important question to ask, is what their wait list is like for moorings or slips, or I don't think, you know, it's one thing to have an idea of how many slips or moorings there are, especially as the fleet ages. I think it's a very important thing to understand that, you know, on some of these harbors, the wait list is 20 years. And secondly, we have a situation in Green Harbor where both marinas are being dredged during the winter, and the one marina that's owned by a very large international company is going to reconfigure their moorings and substantially increase their prices. So, you know, I think there's a trend there of marinas being sold and big companies buying them, and you know, there are commercial boats that tie up in these, and they're possibly going to be priced out. So I think that's something that this report should at least acknowledge or look into.
Very good. Any comment to that?
Yes, I think we get it, the waiting list. We also start before that with this question: do you have moorings designated for commercial? And you know, what does that mean? We do get at the pricing, and then there are some free form answers for both, you know, response sections for both the harbor master and the fishers where, you know, you could write in some of the description like that, what's going on in your harbor.
We
Beth and then Sabatia.
already answered it.
Okay, good. Sabatia. Then Fred.
The story touched on that. Also, when you ask a question like it back in Gloucester, ask all of these areas, and I would send, in my opinion, to Seaport Economic Council, ask them to do the survey. They know there's ports, they know there's city, there are municipalities on them. Second, I would ask, do you have, besides, how many day slips do you have? We have a lot of people coming in from Maine, Rhode Island, vice versa, Boston. And they can unload, but they can't stay at the lock they're unloading. And sometimes with the weather and whatever, do we have temporary moorings for just commercial to unload and come off? Because I know, like they said, some of the spots are being sold, some of them need to be repaired, some of them can't have, it's not deep enough. Ask them if they know about that.
Thanks, Fatia. Frank.
Yes, thank you for having me on. First of all, let you know that I've been using the 2017 port profile extensively in trying to market local fish. It's extremely helpful and useful. I've presented it at the select board meeting and at different public events. So I'm looking forward to the updated version coming out. We'll be using it, I'm sure, substantially as well. I have a couple of questions about how it's going to be formatted. The 2017 version, it appears to me at least, does not count some changes that have occurred since then that probably are more significant now. And let me just enumerate them. One is aquaculture. You know, we've gone into the oyster farming business with a lot of controversy with Cohasset because the aquaculture actually takes place in geographically Cohasset Harbor, but legally it's part of the town of Situate. Another question is the charter party business. It's become very significant. Is that considered a commercial fishery? A lot of the people that run charter party operations are retired or semi-retired commercial fishermen. And I think that their contribution to the local economy is substantial. You know, they bring in an awful lot of people that are traveling and stay in local hotels and eat at local restaurants when they're on their journeys to the ocean. And finally, this I know is a new one, the Northern Gulf of Maine scallop fishery. This year, Situate is going to be very significant because NMFS changed the arbitrary boundary line where you could unload scallops. It had to be north of 42 degrees 20 minutes. We're at 42 degrees 12 minutes in Situate. So I think they've eliminated the boundary entirely. You can unload anywhere now. We had a few boats that were unloading in Situate, and they were given they've received some pushback from NMFS because they were doing it and had to change their strategies. They would like to be from Situate, and I expect that this coming spring, when the Northern Gulf of Maine opens again, we will see a lot of activity. So those are just three changes that I'd like to see considered to be included in the updated report. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. A couple things. I think the changes in what's being landed and where we're going to pick up on some of that in the fishery statistics and the data. And we are going to do it. I think we're going to do a 10-year look back. So it'll include the 5 that were included in the previous report. So we'll pick up on some of that for both aquaculture, because we'll pick up on oyster landings. We'll probably pick that up when we ask harbor masters the simple, kind of the basic question: what fisheries take place in your harbor? So we'll make sure that aquaculture is on there, because that might flag differences over time. And then I think we'll pick up on all those. In the party charter, we do send the survey out to party and charter permit holders. So we will get their thoughts, because, one issue that came up in the last one was parking, and that cuts across there. So I think we'll pick up on all that, Frank, but those are really good points.
That's great.
I'm just want to talk a point Frank made about people who shifted fisheries. Is that gonna be on the survey? Like, what fisheries have you participated in the last 5 years or 10 years? And, and what are you participating in now mostly? I mean, because I know a lot of folks do different fisheries.
there is a question like that. I'll have to look at it to see how we ask about a change over time. Yes, but yes.
Yeah, so that would mean, there's obviously a lot of change, either going from groundfish to lobster or lobster to party charter, so there's a lot of movement going on.
And I think all these types of questions on change speak to the importance of doing this every 5 years, because if we get in that routine, we are gonna pick up on some of those, so.
And I suspect, and I'm gonna go to Dan and Jackie, is that when we get the results back and we have a summarize, I think this group should look at that, and maybe then there are specific things out of that you all want to develop recommendations to the legislature about. So this could be very helpful. So Dan and then Jackie, then we probably just need to move on because of time.
One of the challenges we have about commercial fishing data is the confidentiality. So I'm thinking about Frank's question, how many, and it's a question to Frank, or I should know this, how many aquaculturists do you have in Situate? Is it less than 3?
Yes, I believe it is 2 at the present.
So in that scenario, we wouldn't be able to present that date.
That's true, because it doesn't meet the rule of 3, but the way we got around that in the last one was with a narrative. So there can be a narrative, Situate has a new burgeoning aquaculture.
Yeah, you
We'll
wouldn't
find
get the
ways.
line item of, what was the value of oysters in that year, because if you've got 2 growers, then grower A will know what grower B produced. So I just want to put that out, we always run into these challenges when you slice this data finer and finer and finer, you get tripped up by the confidentiality standards.
Jackie.
So I assume that the Fisher survey will be able to capture the seasonal component of within these communities, whether it's Gloucester or whether it's Situate, because if someone is obviously based in Maine, fishes out of Maine, but comes down to fish for scallops, they're gonna have a Massachusetts permit in order to land, so they won't be missed.
Correct, they will definitely be surveyed. And there are questions about transient need, seasonal fisheries. Both surveys.
Great. Real quickly, who's on the ports group? Sorry, it was Beth, Gordon,
Aubrey, and Ed.
and Ed. Okay, great. All right. So that you'll reconvene those folks in October to go through the.
Yes.
All right.
More to come.
Terrific. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, 2 things. Let's do, for the traffic survivors, let's go through and do a quick introduction. So Allison,
Hi all, Allison Brazius, CZM Director.
Jackie, you introduced yourself, but one more.
Oh, Jackie Odell, Northeast Seafood Coalition.
Vito Ciccone, Gloucester Fishing Community Preservation Fund in Northeast.
Thank you for taking on 12893 Reading, whatever it might have been. Okay. The other thing I have to do is Jared Silver reminded me that we actually have to do since we have a hybrid meeting, we have to do official roll call of the minutes. So I'm going to go by one and ask you if you approve the minutes. So Tim.
Yes.
Al.
Yeah.
Beth.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and then online, Ed, do you approve the minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Aubrey.
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
I'll take that as a yes. And then anybody else that I missed?
Yeah.
Oh, Allison, sorry. Allison, and then Dan.
Dan, of course.
I missed the co-chairs. Well, that's bad form. Oh, Holly. Thank you. Sorry. All right, take it, everybody. All right, I apologize for jumping around on membership. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Jared, we'll make sure we'll do that on all official votes. Tyler, thank you for joining us. We are going to turn this over to you. I know you all been working on a designated port area kind of review and report. I think that was released in late July, early August, and I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll take questions.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm just sent a request to share. Hopefully Abby can approve that, but yeah, thank you all for having me join today. Excited to share the results of this DPA port assessment that we worked on and released right at the end of July this last summer. And I know some of the folks in that room participated in it and provided input and came to meetings and stakeholder listening sessions and interviews. So really appreciate your help for that. All right, looks like I can share now. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Great. Awesome. So, yeah, as I said, I'm Tyler Sola. I'm the assistant director at CZM, and I'm here to share some takeaways about the DPA assessment we released. We worked on with DEP as well as Eastern Research Group. First, I'll talk about some background of the DPA program generally, and then discuss the assessment. All right. So, starting with some background on the Designated Port Area program, the DPA policy was established in Massachusetts. And plans of the DPAs and maps were established in 1978 within the Massachusetts Coastal Zone Management Plan. The two central principles of the program are to promote water-dependent industries as an important sector of the state's economy and to prevent loss of these areas that have key characteristics for water-dependent industry. The premise for this strategy is that it's sound public policy to maximize use of areas that are already suited for ports, port development, and avoid the conversion so that future marine industrial uses would not have to develop new areas for these uses. And presently, economic, environmental, and social factors pose prohibitive challenges to intensive port development elsewhere along the coast, effectively making DPAs a non-routable resource. We have 10 DPAs in the Commonwealth: Gloucester Inner Harbor, Salem Harbor, Lynn, Mystic River, Chelsea Creek, East Boston, South Boston, Weymouth Fore River, New Bedford Fairhaven, and Mount Hope Bay. And DPAs total, all land in, only make up approximately 2% of the state's coastline. In thinking about the program management and implementation generally, CZM is responsible for establishing, mapping, interpreting, and periodically reviewing DPA boundaries. We also ensure federal actions and permits in or impacting DPAs are consistent with enforceable state coastal policies. We work with municipalities to take a comprehensive approach to DPA planning through DPA master plans and municipal harbor plans. And we provide technical assistance to communities and support proactive planning to promote marine development, prevent user conflicts, and accommodate supporting industrial and commercial uses. And with our sister agency, DEP, they implement the requirements through Chapter 91 licensing and requires a large majority of DPA tidelands to be used or reserved for water-dependent industrial uses. And at the local level, municipalities manage uses in DPAs through implementation of local zoning bylaws, and those can vary community to community. Within DPAs, the program is designed to support water-dependent industry, and as a general rule, 75% of a project site within Chapter 91 jurisdiction is required to be developed or reserved for water-dependent industrial uses. However, other uses are allowed in DPAs, including accessory uses. These are uses that are associated with a water-dependent industrial use, like parking, offices, or a cafeteria serving employees of water-dependent industrial use. Temporary uses like parking or warehousing can be allowed on a temporary basis between water-dependent industrial uses on a site. And supporting uses. These can be industrial or commercial uses that can be licensed to provide operational or economic support to water-dependent uses within a DPA. And examples of this could be a restaurant. Public access is also compatible within DPAs, provided that it's designed to be safe and avoiding impacting the function and operations of a water-dependent industrial use. Now, shifting over to the assessment itself, this was sort of the general goal of the assessment. At a high level, we wanted to understand the strengths of the DPA program, the current and emerging challenges, and ultimately to identify improvements that will help strengthen the program. For the assessment, we looked at 5 different focus areas: infrastructure and land use, regulatory framework, funding and financing, community impacts, and coastal resilience. In terms of process, we started the assessment, feels like a while ago now, in October of 2023, and it involved intensive document review and analysis, in addition to a robust stakeholder engagement. We interacted with hundreds of stakeholders, like I was saying, including probably many of you in the room, through public meetings, surveys, interviews, focus groups, listening sessions. We also conducted an economic analysis to provide a snapshot of the contributions that DPAs have on the Massachusetts economy. We also incorporated the requirements of the Mass Leads Act into this assessment. And we took all that data, analysis, and stakeholder input and developed recommendations that were ultimately included in the assessment that was released right at the end of July this year. So I mentioned we had done an economic analysis, and this was intended to look at a high level at the impact that DPAs have on our economy here in Massachusetts. This was challenging, though, because most of the economic analysis was based on jobs and employment data and didn't capture the full benefits and revenues associated with with goods coming into DPAs or the flow through of those goods through DPAs. But despite those limitations, results of the economic analysis indicated that water-dependent industry and DPAs are important contributors to the state and local economic activity. But given the data limitations, we think that these numbers vastly underestimate, the full impact and number of jobs and economic impact of DPAs. As I mentioned, the stakeholder engagement was robust throughout this process, and it was critical for the assessment because it was really important to hear from you and other stakeholders that work in these industries and work in these areas, what's working, what's not. Some of the general things we heard were that DPAs provide local benefits, jobs, goods, and services, that conflicts do exist between the needs of water-dependent industry and the surrounding communities, particularly with things related to traffic, pollution, public access. A lack of maintenance and investment in aging infrastructure limits its functionality and lifespan. And there are funding and financing barriers. That was a big point we heard, especially for private water-dependent industrial users or owners in the DPA. The regulatory process we heard was perceived as complex and inconsistently applied and sometimes hard to navigate. A strong recognition of the importance of coastal resilience across all DPAs. We heard a desire for a holistic port vision and planning framework. We also heard support for establishing a ports commission. There were some mixed views we heard on thinking about altering or expanding the DPA program wholesale, and thinking about changing some of the types of allowable uses. And lastly, there was general agreement that public access should be incorporated thoughtfully within DPAs. So we took all that data analysis and stakeholder feedback and developed a number of different recommendations within those 5 focus areas that I mentioned at the start, starting with infrastructure and land use. And these recommendations focus on the infrastructure supporting DPAs and the water-dependent industry and how DPA lands are utilized or not. So the first recommendation gets back to what I was saying about establishing a port commission to help develop a statewide strategic vision for Massachusetts ports and advise on opportunities for improvement and growth, seeing as this is something we don't really have now statewide. So that was a recommendation we developed. Also developing industry-based needs assessments, thinking about specific industries like commercial and recreational fishing, energy, shipping, bulk cargo and goods, transportation and tourism, ocean technology and emerging markets. This recommendation really revolves around, what are the actual needs of these industries to help make them, to strengthen the industry, to help them grow, to adapt to changes coming in the future, making sure that we're ready to handle those changes and identify those needs, and then ultimately, hopefully, support those needs. In recommendation number 3, integrating DPA considerations into other ongoing initiatives and planning initiatives at the state level, including resilient coasts, the integrated land use strategy, MILUS, the Massachusetts Ocean Management Plan update that CZM is doing, and just other ongoing state planning programs. 4th, looking at creating an online marketplace to track DPA vacancies to help advertise potential areas and link up those spaces with potential users to help reduce the amount of vacant land in DPAs. And lastly, exploring the development of a pilot program to think about maybe some of those new or innovative and coexisting uses. The next category of recommendations revolves around regulatory framework. The first recommendation being, just to try and demystify some of the regulatory process and provide some guidance to help clarify what the process is, what some of the flexibility that currently exists, and highlighting best practices in key areas, to help with consistency and increasing transparency in the regulatory process. Second recommendation in this category was CZM proactively conducting DPA boundary reviews and periodic DPA assessments. Some of the DPAs in the Commonwealth have not had a formal boundary review since they were established in 1978. So recognizing that there are probably some areas where the boundary may be modified as things have changed in the number of decades since they were established. The third recommendation, continuing to engage in ongoing permit streamlining initiatives that are happening across the state and making sure that DPAs and water-dependent industry and the permitting processes involved there are part of these streamlining processes and making sure that we're involved in those conversations. The fourth recommendation, looking at compliance with regulatory requirements of the DPA program within each DPA and making sure that there's good consistency. The fifth recommendation, helping to develop some best practices for design of projects adjacent to DPAs. So this relates to thinking about sort of buffer areas that are right next to the DPA. And as we know, DPAs can, they can operate at different hours. They can, produce noise, sometimes smells. And so thinking about what best design practices for areas maybe adjacent to the edge of a DPA for a buffer area. This third category, the funding and financing, this was the thing we heard, one of the things we heard loudest and clearest from stakeholders, and one of the primary assessments takeaways from the assessment. And so these recommendations are, aiming to try and address some of the challenges we heard. The first being to leverage existing funding mechanisms to actively support DPAs, thinking about existing programs like CZM's Coastal Resilience Grants, the Seaport Economic Council grants, dam and seawall and repair grants. The second recommendation, supporting water-dependent industrial users and DPA host municipalities in thinking about accessing federal funds and resources. The Port Infrastructure Development Program is currently an active federal funding opportunity, so thinking about that. The third recommendation, looking at mechanisms to allow private water-dependent industrial users and property owners to be eligible for state and public funding, ensuring that there's providing a direct public benefit there. And then lastly, thinking about a port infrastructure and facility improvement program specifically to fund infrastructure improvements, as well as providing technical assistance to those entities in the DPA, including both public and private users. And then with community impacts, as I mentioned, there are a number of impacts that DPA's communities identified during the assessment. These recommendations kind of focus on helping to try and address all those impacts so that communities can also experience the benefits of DPAs as well. The first, promoting opportunities and programs for water-dependent industrial workforce development, training. The second, incorporating community buffers and public access within the DPA without jeopardizing public safety or causing operational interference. Supporting efforts to minimize the local impacts of DPA port operations on environmental justice communities and surrounding neighborhoods. And lastly, working with partners to develop programs and incentivize efforts to decarbonize and electrify port operations to help with some of that air pollution, noise, and some of those other issues we heard from DPA communities. All right, and coastal resilience. As we know, the impacts of climate change are already detrimentally impacting DPAs and the surrounding communities. These recommendations seek to help address some of those impacts and advance resilient efforts. The first being integrating consideration of the unique needs of DPAs into the Resilient Coast Initiative, identify funding opportunities for coastal resilience in DPAs specifically. And then lastly, supporting water-dependent industrial users in developing operational response and recovery plans to continue access to water and minimize operational disruptions after severe coastal storms. Coastal resilience is obviously something that's near and dear to us. And thinking about these areas, coastal resilience and a functional DPA are not mutually exclusive at all. Sometimes you just might need to think about resilience in a little bit of a different way in terms of how these areas are designed to function and what these businesses need to, how they need to operate to succeed. Those were the 5 focus categories that we started out with. But over the course of the assessment, and as we engaged with stakeholders and we listened and we learned, we realized that there was a lot more listening and learning to do and an opportunity to strengthen communication and engagement and technical support around DPAs. So we created this 6th category, and then some recommendations under this were, developing outreach materials to help with understanding more about the regulatory process and improving awareness. Continuing to engage with stakeholders about the role of DPAs and identify opportunities to increase connections within the community, helping to bring the community into the DPA and the DPA into the community. Developing webinars, office hours, and other technical assistance to support navigating the DPA program. And then sharing success stories and highlighting the role of DPAs in driving the blue economy and the successes in our state. So, that's most of the important stuff, but I'd definitely be remiss if I didn't thank my fellow CZM team members, Allison, who's in the room, Sam Haynes, Catherine Glenn, and Joanna Yellen, and my DP colleagues as well, Daniel Padgett and Chrissy Hops, for their hard work and energy during this assessment. It was a long road, starting in October and then finishing in July of this year, but we learned a lot. And I think one of the biggest takeaways and that was exciting things about it is that I don't think there's ever been a time when this many folks, including all of you in the room, are thinking about these areas, thinking about the water dependent industry, thinking about the blue economy, and talking about it. And so thinking about what we can do now together collectively to take that energy, and think about how we can help strengthen these areas and the industries and businesses that you all work for. So thanks for listening. And I'll happy to answer any questions.
Terrific. So let's take questions around the room from the commission first and then commission members online. So any questions from folks in the room? Vito.
Just real quick, that was a great presentation. Wondering if there's a plan for follow-up. Great recommendations there, but what would be the format or process for trying to implement or explore what's doable and what isn't? Thanks.
Tyler.
I'll start. Great question. And a lot of recommendations, ranging from, very ambitious to, things that maybe some more low hanging fruit, and wanted to acknowledge that we wanted to swing big with the recommendations in the sense that we knew that CZM ourselves can't do all of those recommendations. Many of them, part of how we work is, networked and collectively with our sister agencies at the state level, working with partners at the federal level, and importantly, working with you all and, communities. And so it really, some of these recommendations really are going to take all of us if they're going to succeed. But, part of what we've been doing is looking at what are some of the things that, we CZM could do, or that we could do in conjunction with, DEP, one of our sister agencies, and starting to tackle some of those low hanging fruit pieces. But, hopeful that some of those larger, more ambitious recommendations, as we think about, additional collaboration and opportunities, that there'll be some movement on those as well. But definitely wanted to acknowledge that by no means, as CZM going to do all of those recommendations just ourselves wholly.
Sure, and I'll just add in, thank you for the tee up to our next conversation, because a couple of the recommendations are actually advanced in the Mass Ready Act. So a few of them around funding and financing, and then also one about a Port Sustainability Commission establishing that. So eager to have input on others that you would all like to see advance, more quickly than others. Looking for that feedback, but those are two key ones.
And we post
immediately.
Sure. We post the slides, right, for everybody.
Or we can.
Bradley, do we post them? Okay, but
We can after.
Okay.
And the report's available online for your reading pleasure.
Online members, commission members, questions? Tyler, let me ask you maybe a bit of a hard question. So if you can defer, if you wish not answer it. So one of the challenges of the DPAs over the years has been that when someone really wants a piece of their property out, if they have friends in the legislature, they've been successful in doing so, which in some cases has led to some incoherence in the DPA structure. I'm curious whether you heard that in the public comment and if any of your recommendations tried to address that question.
I think generally, we want to make sure that DPAs are working well and working well for the water dependent industrial users, but also for the communities they're in, and so I think part of CZM's approach, to a boundary review or to municipal harbor planning, is a thoughtful approach in working with the communities and working with stakeholders and figuring out, what's really working, what's not. What are they, looking, at least for boundary review, applying very specific, clear criteria. So we think we approach it through that holistic way, working with the community and stakeholders, with that goal of having, a functional, successful DPA for, the DPA itself, the water dependent industrial users, as well as the community.
Great. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, and I think this does lead into the next one. Do you want to say a little bit about it? Do you want me to cover a few things, Nelson?
Maybe Commissioner O'Shea and I are
what?
happy to highlight a few elements of the Mass Ready Act, and obviously Aaron should jump in as well. So the Mass Ready Act was, I've got to check my timing here. Commissioner, it was this past fall was announced in the fall. It is an intent by the administration to advance work across all of our environmental agencies, advance some key priorities, as well as supporting the sort of the robust economy that comes with those critical environmental values and to commit to promoting resilience across our economy. Because we know how much resilience and addressing the impacts of climate change is challenging. So my computer unfortunately just died, so I don't have at my fingertips all of the individual key elements to it. So Commissioner Shea, if you have any you want to highlight, or maybe Pat, you could go through some of the couple highlights. I'd like to highlight a couple from the CZM side, and then I know, sure she might want to connect on some of the key biodiversity elements, but from the CZM side of EEA, and the Master Act was a wide-ranging bill that touched many environmental agencies and our partnership in an all-of-government approach across different agencies of the Commonwealth. But a couple of highlights particular to CZM and our work with our partner agencies included an authorization of over $200 million to advance our Resilient Coast Initiative, which we've spoken about earlier in the year, and to bring resilience to our coastal work. It also included some authorization within that 200 dedicated for our ports and working waterfronts to advance some of the work that Tyler just highlighted through the DPA program. It also added a number of legislative elements, including work for flood disclosures, so that folks understand sort of, it's pretty common in the industry. We want to make it even playing field and fair practice so that folks can understand the flooding history of a property if they're going to buy it on the residential side. Commissioner, do you want to talk about the highlights on the biodiversity front?
Yeah, so Department of Fish and Game received a number of key authorizations. And again, these are just authorizations. If everybody understands how bond bills work, we get allocated a certain amount of capital money based on what is released from what they call bond cap from these authorizations. So that it's just an authorization to spend up to, or to be funded up to, but it doesn't mean we always get that amount. So just want to be clear about that. But it is in the legislature right now, right? So it's certainly open for people to speak with their legislators to advocate for whatever they think is important to them in that bill. But in terms of Department of Fish and Game, we got a couple of new lines, meaning new lines from the previous environmental bond bill that weren't in the previous one that are in now. One is for marine habitat restoration, including authorization for $5 million. So that would go restore areas like eelgrass beds, kelp areas, help to establish nature-based solutions using like oyster reefs, artificial reefs, things like that, as well as fish ladders and helping with anadromous fish runs. That's $5 million. We're happy that we have a new line. In fact, we have $1.5 million already in our capital plan for the next 2 years for marine habitat restoration, and we've been working with Bob Glenn and team on that. We got $20 million for community biodiversity grants or for community biodiversity in general. So that can fund, any different type of research and science and tech related to potentially supporting our marine fisheries. So just keep that in mind, and as well as helping with, a number of other initiatives more inland as well, particularly in our communities. We're hoping to focus on some of the communities that, might not consider themselves important for biodiversity, but that would be our coastal communities as well as our urban and suburban communities. And then I would just say also, Office of Fishing and Boating Access, which is in the department, has also received authorization, which helps us establish new access areas, boat launch and ramps to and fishing piers along the coastal areas as well as inland. So that's an important piece not to forget about. That I know, maybe certainly our commercial users use these ramps, but also very important for recreational fishery. And we have a number of areas that, probably go outside the scope of this commission within our department lines, including land acquisition and protection. But I guess what's another good one? Well, I should just mention, we did get authorization for modernization of our trout hatchery out in the central part of the state, the McLaughlin hatchery. So anyway, probably again, a lot of our lines may be beyond commercial fisheries commission, but I don't know, Allison, if there are others you want to mention.
I think just for interest to round out the bill, $308 million for high-risk dams, inland flood control systems, and coastal marine infrastructure. $587 million to invest in parks, trails, beaches, and historic sites. So a lot of that, as you said, Commissioner, has some relevance to the coast and also work inland. $177 million to improve transportation infrastructure, including bike lanes, greenways, and pedestrian bridges, and $28 million for solid waste to decrease pollution. So those are just sort of broadly the rounding out of the bill. But happy to talk in more detail about it, or if there anything, Dan, you wanted to add?
No.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things for people to just be aware of is in it, speaking of the last recommendations, is a recommendation to create a ports commission and the commission to essentially recommend a vision for Massachusetts ports overall, which gets tied partly to the recommendations here from CZM around understanding economic development wise, what is actually needed across users in the DPAs. So I just would note a few things you would be aware of. The commission would have, it's supposed to issue this report within, I think, 18 months. It would things like, it needs to include issues around commercial and recreational fishing, energy, shipping, building, cargo and goods, transportation, ocean technology, emerging markets. And it should essentially assess existing conditions, industry needs, and opportunities for growth and change. It has 21 members. There will be a member there'll be a representative from each of the DPA ports. And then it provides no more than one representative shall be from the same city or town, 5 of whom shall be representative of each water dependent industry sector. So commercial fishing should be on the commission, but obviously you maybe want to, if you like or don't like that composition of membership, you might want to be reaching out to your senator or rep just to mention that issue, because there are some details about that. And for those of you want, it's on page 43 and 44 of the bill, if you want to look at that commission structure, because I think that'll be important for one of you or more to be on to influence and shape.
So Pat, I think in terms of timing of this commission's report release, do want to think about how the release of this report can support consideration of the Mass Ready Act, its funding authorizations. The timing of that would be something to consider. I know you've got a timeline with the survey of the ports, so just ask the commission maybe think about when they want to time that report.
When is this likely to pass, never predicting a legislature, but
I was
like
gonna say,
this
see the
year?
legislature.
This year?
Well, I mean, it'd probably be 2026.
Yeah.
It's my guess.
Okay.
That's the crystal ball guess, yeah.
Okay, well, we'll take your crystal ball. Let me see, I've got Aubrey online and then back to Jackie.
Thank you. Yeah, I just am still trying to wrap my head around a little bit the designated port area, like designations, and I know there are currently 10 in the state, and I know Ed has brought it up before that there's currently none in the South Shore, Cape Cod. I know that over time, boundary adjustments for DPAs have occurred in New Bedford and Gloucester. I don't think any new ones have been created recently. I'm just trying to understand if the DPA requirements are too rigid and have to encompass more mixed use of harbors compared to like small boat community scale ports. I'm just trying to understand like if it's, I know you mentioned, commercial fishing, maritime use, but I'm just trying to understand if this will continue to exclude ports that need improvements to working waterfront or not.
It's a good question, Aubrey, and something we've talked about a lot. I think it's important to remember that the DPA program was established in the 70s to protect those those deep concentrations of very heavy maritime industrial uses. So the program is not meant to exclude or in any way ignore our other working waterfronts or our more mixed use areas. It was meant to sort of protect as a land use certain areas that were needed for those very heavy marine industrial uses that needed large laydown space, deep ports, long quayside area, sort of the heaviest of industries. I think there is an opportunity. There is nothing that prevents a community from asking for a new DPA to be created if they would want to. And certainly all of the funding mechanisms we're looking at would not necessarily be limited only to DPAs. They would also be available to working waterfronts, and some of those more mixed use areas. It was just intended to be that focused protection for that heaviest. I think it's worth thinking about more, and hopefully something that this commission will continue to explore, whether there is a call for a regime with more transitional or mixed use space or a different type of area, or if there's hope for stronger or lesser protections. I think that's still an area of hot
And,
debate.
and just a question, my understanding for smaller ports, as Aubrey just noted, like the Seaport Council does issue grants,
Absolutely.
right?
The Seaport Economic Council, in fact, spends a lot of their resources on the smaller grants, on the smaller ports and boat ramps and fish piers. Because they have, I think, just naturally a smaller grant pool, and the big DPAs often take these larger combinations of federal and state funds in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of infrastructure upgrades. So there's a tough to balance there.
Aubrey, any follow-up to that for now, but I think raising that awareness, and hopefully someone on the council will, on this new commission, if it's formed, would actually need to raise some of those issues, but Aubrey, any follow-up?
No, I really appreciate that answer. Thank you very much.
And as all you know, because Maine is primarily incorporates the small ports, it only has really two large ports, which is really Portland and Shreveport. They have a pretty set of rigorous programs around their smaller ports and the like, which at some point may or may not be worth looking at here. Jackie.
So I was just gonna ask a question about the Mass Ready Act. I realize it's more focused on cross-agency resilience. Is there anything specific that to offshore wind that we should be looking at within that bill? It's just that the commission would wanna maybe focus on or weigh in on. I haven't looked at it yet. So
Good.
I appreciate the update of some of the key components for the different agencies, but or departments, but if there's something that is offshore wind specific, it would be good for us to.
So we'll double check, but to my recollection, there's nothing specific. What I think what you would see is simply that authorization for general port infrastructure upgrades that would benefit many industries, including offshore wind.
I did a quick type of offshore wind into it, the search, and found nothing.
That's what, okay, good. I'm glad I hadn't forgotten.
But it might be worth your own search, just in case my search fails. But it's a great
But
question.
it's the infrastructure and the port, so it's really.
It's focused on
component, right? Okay.
Infrastructure broadly across the Commonwealth.
Okay.
Pat, could I ask you a quick question? You mentioned very briefly something about Maine and their smaller ports. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I know that, one, because of the terrible nor'easter, what was that? There was a whole statewide effort to kind of repair and increase resilience there. And it was actually apparently a pretty effective program with a lot of money and good organization at the state level with a lot of coordination across state agencies. So I'm going to find out more about that. And then generally there's an effort and a lot of also nonprofits who focus a lot on smaller ports like facing on the names right now, but there's a number of them that focus on small ports because there's so many in Maine.
I mean, should we have that as an agenda item here?
I think it would be great to learn more about it. There's a couple different initial initiative and then a follow-on legislation. I'd love to learn more about it here. I think one of the key features of one of the programs is that they have grant money similar to our Seaport Economic Council, but dedicated for the resilience of smaller ports and working waterfronts that is connected with sort of working waterfront easements or restrictions on the land use. You know,
I just want to point out though, all of the funding is still restricted to municipal properties. So we talk about small ports, I think everybody would be available for biodiversity or resilience, coastal resiliency funding for grants, whether they're in the DPA or not. But I think it's important, I'm part of the Gloucester Inner Harbor DPA. It is almost wholly privately owned. Almost none of the privately owned peninsula properties can meet any of the dimensional requirements inside DPA. So water dependent use zones, all of those dimensions are meant to be on these huge municipal type or private properties in other DPAs. We don't meet any of them. All the water dependent use zones overlap each other. We got zero square footage to put any supporting uses on there, even at 25%. So there's no funding for the major port in Gloucester, right, to maintain its infrastructure. And we're still primarily a fishing industry. We're a CFC here, right, about commercial fishing. If we want our DPA to support them, fisheries are probably one of the, either in the middle, if you got a really good tenant, or on the lower end of the viable tenancy. right? As far as what they can afford per square foot. It's a triple net lease. They've got to maintain, something that's more expensive on the shore than it is not. So for those reasons, how do we make a landlord or a person that owns the property be able to be bankable to rebuild, to continue to have that use? DPA also requires you do not displace commercial fishing vessels for at least 5 years, right? Type of thing. We want the commercial fishing vessels tied to the dock. We want to continue to maintain, the property as well. So there's a huge caveat there. I was a member for the last 3 years of the Harbor Plan Committee. And we tried like heck to find anything in the DPA to improve our master plan. And there was nothing. In fact, we went backward. The 2014 Harbor Plan allowed 50-50 supporting use. But once people looked at the water dependent use zones, they couldn't do anything anyway, right? So we went back to 25-75 because subsequent to our 2015 submission and approval by the state, folks at DEP realized that is in fact an illegal language of 50-50. So we went backward to 20. So all we accomplished in our harbor plan, not because we didn't try, but because it really isn't, we're a misfit in the DPA. But I would say, and I own part owner of 3 of the properties, we want to stay in the DPA. We're an industrial port. We own property on an industrial park. But we can't overlook, if Gloucester doesn't fit in the DPA because you can't get any funding, then that's a problem.
I mean, I wouldn't know what Tyler presented, and I saw in your recommendations. So one of the problems in all DPAs is exactly that. The Seaport Council money otherwise is only public. So I noticed that in the recommendations, there's some serious thought about trying to figure out how to actually have private public funding, not just public funding. I don't know if you wanted to say more.
That's what I was gonna say, is that we heard that loud and clear. We know that's a big barrier for folks. And so one of our recommendations is to look at ways to do the public-private funding together. And the law department's working on it. Don't have a solution yet, but we are working on it actively.
Even if it was temporary revolving loan money, because the catch 22 is you've got to get it built, then they will come,
Yeah.
right? But a bank will not look at it at this point, because who's coming? There's only a handful of fishing industry type.
I'd love to talk more after about the loan idea.
Only because of time, was something a really important point to raise. Gulf of Maine Research Institute was DRMI, was the group I was thinking of, along with the state that does a lot of kind of local kind of port development sport work in Maine. Okay, thank you. Great conversation.
Can I just add, I believe that in Maine, that storm that hit 2 years ago, a little less than 2 years ago, a lot of the funding came through the Maine congressional delegation.
Probably did.
And there was a fair amount of federal funding that came to help support not only the municipal properties, but I think some private docks as well, because there was a lot of private facilities that were badly damaged.
That may be less likely in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so very much. That's good. I have more to follow on stories piece. So again, the group's going to get together to kind of advance that. We're going to get some really good data we're going to look at next year to see what that means. Point from the commissioner about how we kind of think about our recommendations tying up with the Mass Ready Act potentially as well. I want to turn to Frank at Marachi, who we really appreciate here. And Dan, maybe you want to introduce the topic and then I'll turn over to Frank.
You know what? I know this is our 4th meeting together, and one of the challenges is to focus this group in that part of the spectrum that is not only just your domain appropriate for you, but also not to sort of bleed into sort of the functions of other groups. But having said that, we have a seafood marketing committee, and the work that they do has a lot of excellent positive effects, we believe, on the commercial fishing interests. One of the issues that came up at our regular meetings is this issue of undervalued flounder. Ed Barrett has brought it to our attention, Frank as well, numerous times. And there's a lot of conversation about, why flounders appear to be selling, flounder fillets appear to be selling at about 60% of a cod or a haddock fillet, and I don't necessarily think it's because they don't taste good, but we're trying to figure out exactly how to solve that, to sort of restore what the term is consumer surplus, to maximize the value and to try to address that which Frank and Ed have been bringing to our attention, that these flounders and, you know, and often sell on the market for less than what the fishermen have to lease them. So that this is a real problem. So we have been addressing it through some videos, trying to get consumer
Next slide.
yeah, the consumers to be interested. And so I'm gonna turn it over to Frank and to Story to talk about kind of the outgrowth of what the seafood marketing program is doing. But also we want to get your input because many of you are not part of that seafood marketing steering committee. So I'll turn it over to Story.
Yeah, real quickly before we turn it over to Frank, this slide kind of talks about what the seafood marketing program's been doing to try to increase that consumer demand. But Frank also kind of added on a second issue at our seafood marketing committee meeting, as Dan said, where there's issues also on the processing end, and there's volatility in the marketplace, which means volatility for the harvesters. So if we go to the next slide, you know, I'll turn it over to Frank to video, that video is playing, but we couldn't hear it, that's okay. So on this slide, I'm going to turn it over to Frank, but Frank brought up some issues that he sees in the supply chain and in processing capacity. And we thought this group, being a good representation of the ports across the state, could help with this conversation. So Frank, do you want to describe the issues you see a little bit?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, sound good, Frank.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Story has pretty well captured the problem, but you know, this has been going on for a long time. It began probably with a transition to catch shares where vessels are assigned a quota and they can fish that quota or can lease from other vessels or inactive permits, additional fish. So the whole strategy of fishing has been changed in the last decade because of this. And one of the things that we find ourselves up against is this concept of choke stocks. A choke stock is where the cost of leasing equals or exceeds the ex-vessel value of the fish. And the primary example of choke stock for us is Gulf of Maine cod, where almost invariably you lose money catching cod. So the fishery is shifted from a targeting fishery, targeting what makes you the most money because of either the high value or the high volume or a combination thereof, to an avoidance fishery, staying away from the stuff that costs you money. And unfortunately, the species that are in surplus in this allocation are primarily the flatfish, along with things like pollock, for example, as well. But flatfish for the smaller inshore boats are the primary fishery that has opportunity for growth. But growth is very difficult when there's a price ceiling, which is imposed by the marketplace. And interestingly, just as a little bit off topic, but not really, a week ago Sunday, we had in Scituate what we called our Fisherman's Fest. It was the first attempt at this, and it was incredibly successful. We had a bunch of vendors on the Scituate Town Pier marketing their local products, and among them were flounder fillets, yellowtail flounder fillets prepared in different ways. Everybody loved it. Everything sold out. It was an enormous success, but yet it's extraordinarily difficult to get this product to the consumer. And one of the reasons is processing capacity. Processing capacity, of course, has shrunk over the years for a variety of reasons, not limited to, but including fluctuations in supply caused by regulatory changes, but also lack of labor, lack of facilities, and probably some others as well. So DMF has done an incredible job at marketing these products. And again, their experience, like mine, has been it's well received by the public wherever it is offered, but getting it to the public is the problem. And what came up in conversation at the seafood marketing advisory commission was maybe we should be looking beyond having hand filleting as our primary means of processing fish. And it's already shifting in many, many areas, but flatfish doesn't appear to be one of those areas where mechanical processing, in other words, a robotic machine to fillet fish rather than a bunch of people standing at a bench filleting, is the more cost-effective way of approaching it. Flatfish are particularly problematic, and I have firsthand experience of this because as my role as one of the directors of this local Catch 143 nonprofit, I fillet fish that we give away to the food pantries and church fairs and things like that to try to promote local fish. Flatfish is incredibly labor intensive. The productivity of flatfish is probably about 30% of that of cod or haddock. The reason being you're handling more pieces, they're smaller, it's just more, less efficient. So anyway, this is the conversation. It's brought us to this point, and I'd just be very, very pleased if the commission could sort of talk through this and see if there's a way forward that could benefit the shoreside infrastructure of the industry as well as the fishing fleets up and down the coast, particularly in the smaller harbors, where again we're kind of limited to a high percentage of our catches and landings being flatfish. So I'll leave it at that and see what other people have to say. Thank you very much.
Frank, thank you. And Frank and Story, do you all have a specific recommendation that you all are thinking? Like we should buy 25 our state-of-the-art cutting machines or whatever. Is there a recommendation you all are thinking of?
Well, it may come to that, but I think this group might also have ideas about what infrastructure might exist in other parts of the state or other models that work. I think this might be right for some sort of a focus group, not just including folks in this room, but including multiple groups. So those are some thoughts I have.
Great. Thoughts, comments from folks here?
I've got a question.
Yeah, please do.
Thanks. And sorry, I was late. Wife's car broke down, so I had to get my granddaughter to school. So hand fillet for flatfish, you get about 25 to 29% of the meat yield, right? Is it higher or lower with the machine?
A little higher, yeah,
a little higher.
Look at third. Yeah.
How much higher, Vito, do you think it is?
About 33%, I think.
Maybe about
Yeah,
5.
depending. Fish are animals, right? Sometimes the meat's not as prevalent on the bone, so you get a lower yield, but I think on average, Roger might be a better expert on that, but I'm thinking around the third. Yeah.
And there's no market, there's no whole fish, but like I know over in Europe, you go into restaurants and they serve the whole fish, right? There's none of that here.
We like our stuff processed for whatever reason.
So my understanding is that there's basically one cutting machine in this region for who's cutting? Or do we have to ship it out west and then it comes back? Who's?
There were
What is
cutting
the-
machines in Bedford for sure, and I think there might have been one or two in Portland, but the yield on them and they're finicky. Those machines need an expert to come from overseas to adjust them. When they go out of whack, you're out of business, because what happens is if your yield goes down to 25% because something's not calibrated perfectly in the machine, you kind of got to stop, but you got to pay a lot less money for the fish because you're throwing a lot more away. So there's nothing better than hand cut fillet, no question about it. You would think we should be able to, if there was enough money and it can steady enough work in it, you probably could find folks to do it.
Just so folks know, I mean, we've talked a lot with USDA folks on other groundfish stocks for redfish, haddock, pollock over the years. Few years ago, we also explored opportunities for flatfish with them. Cause that's, aside from just marketing and hoping that people are going to buy your fish through marketing programs, it's actually really good to get some sort of a purchasing program in place that helps to stabilize, the production as well. And it may help some of these more focused, niche, maybe state programs that may be able to also come up behind that. But I mean, the price is just, and it's the instability in the science. I don't know what to say, because we just had a yellowtail assessment and I'm really, actually, we've been so busy with everything else. I haven't sat and read it yet, but we may find that we may have some huge change that's happened with yellowtail. So we need to have stability in our science, in our quotas. You know, there needs to be a level of reliability there, and then we can work on all these fabulous programs for purchasing and marketing. And but we, you know, we have to, it's a comprehensive plan.
You know, no fish, no nothing else.
Right, I mean, and you need purchasing programs. I don't know if we've ever had any discussions about state purchasing programs, but that would be very beneficial, not just USDA programs.
Let me go to Al, Beth, John, Roger, then Ed and Frank. A lot of, okay, Al.
So Jackie just nailed it. The flounder market collapsed when we had a huge reduction in witch flounder and place quota. And we were still finding lots of it. The infrastructure collapsed, the workforce collapsed, and it basically went away. A couple of years later, they realized their mistake. They doubled and tripled the quotas. We started landing the fish. There was nobody to process it. Nobody wanted it. Restaurants didn't want it anymore. And we were getting a third of the price that we had before the quotas were slashed. I mean, just asking around, the only way out of this is a two-headed monster. We need to process these animals. So we need the cutting machines. I believe. I don't think that workforce is coming back to process flatfish. We have at least 2 outfits in Gloucester who, they're trying to hand cut. If you give them a couple of cutting machines, they can, we're off and running. That and the USDA program that Jackie mentioned that is specifically for pollock, redfish, and haddock. If we can extend that somehow with some other funding to start promoting and doing it with the flatfish. I think once we get it out there, we're trying to do what, little programs here and there, not specifically for flatfish, but my goal is to get flatfish out there to the people. They're gonna realize that it's a really good fish and it's relatively inexpensive, but we need to process it, get it out there, market it. I mean, this all needs to come together because, it's been, when did they slash those quotas, 2017? And the market hasn't come back yet. So obviously we need to do something. It's just not gonna come back organically. It needs help.
Beth.
Would it be unreasonable to ask if this body could send a letter on the executive order restoring American seafood competitiveness on the processing needs of the collective seafood industry in Massachusetts? It's not just flatfish, there's like 1 or 2 people processing lobster in Massachusetts. Our lobsters go to Canada, come back as a lobster, Canada/US.
Let me hold that. I'm gonna come back to that. So let me get around to the other question. I'm gonna come back to whether we should.
It might be beneficial too, to speak directly to some of the processors. I know Kyle is in Tishon, New Bedford, they do some flounder, maybe even do like a site visit, see what works, what does it. Reach out to them directly, get some input, as we move forward.
Great, Roger.
I think Jackie used the right adjective. We need sort of a comprehensive, program with sort of everyone, the end user, the processors and the folks all speaking together. And maybe, I love flounder. I think it's a great fish, but you're right, it fell out of favor when the quotas went down. We're just starting a new fish and chips place. And part of my thinking is I really want to promote flounder. It's a great tasting fish. And, so maybe there's some way that we can find the pump, whether it is, brands for a cutting machine. Initially, obviously, the hand cutting would work. And as soon as we prove that there's a market out there, others will jump on. And then the cutting machines come in and, work with the with those that are hand cutting. As well, and then once people start to see that there's a market for it, that might draw others into, the labor pool and specialty end of the flatfish. I think the flatfish is really one of the great resources of, the Massachusetts fishing industry.
And
Yeah.
I just want to add one more thing to the market. Recently, I've been witch flounder fishing also. And all summer long, we were getting really good prices, anywhere from 220 to 180, which today is a good price. 3 weeks ago, it collapsed. It went from, 1 week down to 140, the next week down to 80 cents, then down to 50 cents, and they didn't even want it. Apparently, the only market for witch flounder is New York.
Is where?
New York, the New York market. And if they don't want it, nobody else does for some reason. So that's how delicate. And that's just one species of flounder. That's how delicate the market is.
Yikes. Let me go to Ed and then to Frank.
Just everyone else has pretty much covered what I was gonna say. I just throw in though that it's just funny if you go to Boston restaurants now, it's just not on the menu. And you find things like branzini on the menu.
A lot of branzini lately.
And and I think that a lot of that has to do with COVID, because I think restaurants are stretched so thin that they want a frozen product that they can hold in inventory, that they can portion, that's already portioned. I don't know the answer. I mean, how do you get that back on the menu? Maybe Roger would have some ideas on that, but it just seems to be somewhat of a result of COVID, and how vulnerable restaurants are right now.
To Ed's point, one of the things that we're thinking about, and we just set up up in Gloucester, a nitrogen facility. And so when there is an abundance and when you freeze product under nitrogen, the product quality is really good because it freezes in a matter of minutes, not hours. So, when there's an abundance coming in at times, if, people put up some product, then when there's not as much available, this kind of evens out the supply chain. And it would encourage, those to, when they're hitting to take it and, put it up.
Frank, let me go to you, then I'll just talk about next steps. We'll get people a break here, but Frank.
Oh, Frank, you're muted.
Joey, do you want to mention the ag program at some point, the food security grants?
Frank, can you get up? There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was so muted. Let me just begin by saying that Jackie is absolutely correct, that the root of the problem is the dissonance between allocation, that is how much fish the government says you can catch, and availability, how much is actually out there to get caught. We're not going to fix that instantaneously. What we need to do is build some more resilience into the entire system so we can coexist with the problems while the Northeast Seafood Coalition and others try to resolve them. It's not going to happen instantaneously. And we have a current disaster going on with fish prices, as Al just mentioned, the collapse of the gray sole or witch flounder price. So one of the things that I think we need to do is begin to look beyond just the restaurant trade and look at food security. The programs that USDA is doing now with redfish and pollock and haddock, I think could be expanded into flatfish. And there would be a place where you could have a continuing demand and the need for some kind of a processing capacity that has the ability to absorb significant influxes of landed product without collapsing the ex-vessel price. So, I think I would kind of start in that direction. I think Roger is also correct that flounder is undermarketed and that the Seafood Marketing Commission has actually done some really great work. They've got Laura Foley doing some wonderful video on it, but it's just not enough to move enough fish to move the needle on the ex-vessel pricing. So we need something that's big, substantial, you know, a 100-pound gorilla, if you will, in the marketing place. And I think food security and USDA might be the directions to head for this. But don't give up on the consumer side, because flounder is a wonderful product. You know, flounder is what brought me through 50 years of fishing. And here I am now retired from it, looking back and saying, I couldn't have made it without flatfish, you know, without yellowtails and dabs. So they're an important component. That's what nature gives us. We need to be able to use it, and we're not using it in a very efficient way at present. So anything you could do, I think, would be really helpful. But the ability to push enough fish to change the needle, to fix the fishery so that small boats and ports like Situate or Green Harbor or Plymouth can continue to operate isn't in the cards. It's not going to happen soon enough to prevent the ultimate disappearance of those small, you know, family operated fisheries. So with that, I thank you.
Story, last word on this. Did you want to say about USDA?
I wanted to say something about the food security and infrastructure grant program. So if, as we work through this over the next few months, if it looks like cutting machines infrastructure could help, the next round of those FSIG grants would be next spring, likely. And Wendy and I are in regular communication with the folks at AG that run that program. And if something like this becomes a priority based on the work that we're doing, that's something that we could consider seriously then, and make sure that the industry's priorities are known going into that grant program, and encourage folks to apply, things like that. So that would be the timing on that grant opportunity for infrastructure. And this type of project is perfect, you know, for that. And food security, as Frank said, that connection. So just want to bring that up.
So there's two options here, and again, just about how much work you all want to do. So we could, like, again, bring in other people too, but we could, a few of you who are interested in this, we could form kind of a subcommittee, or I think Jared calls them focus groups, of kind of this issue around flatfish and processing, maybe the whole story a little bit, because as Jackie said, it's all kind of connected. So we could do that. Beth also raised the broader question about processing in the state. And so I don't know whether twofold. Do we want to jump on the flounder thing, because I guess it feels a little imminent, but also then really think about how processing, what we can say about processing in a future meeting, to really dive into that more broadly, and then talk about what we may want to even recommend to the legislature about maybe some support of where we maybe have lost that infrastructure, and that is not a good thing. Svatya.
Well, thank you. Just so you know, Dan and Tom and myself with Story and Wendy, we are doing promotion, but we're also working on a pilot program. Just completed the feasibility study report that we got on Friday that we met. Fish to plate, meaning local fish, whether it's New Bedford, Gloucester, we're doing a pilot program, obviously Gloucester, Cape Cod, it doesn't matter, anywhere in Massachusetts, to feed the underserved. And it will go to Greater Boston first, which is giving us a small program of 400,000. It's supposed to be 300, but she says 400. I'm gonna make sure she lives to us. Yeah, by mistake, but to work on this program. If we don't get the supplies, and that was the number one thing with Al, and how do we work on this and getting the cutting, and because they want fillet, and it doesn't happen, we're not gonna promote haddock or cod. It's gonna be all fillets. It's gonna be, of course, flounder, and whether it's big whiting that day or redfish or whatever fish we can get, because once it's cut and cleaned, it's all whitefish. And they want it in 1 pound packages, and we can do that in other programs. But remember, the cost of processing, the cost of actually hiring someone to continue to do this, to keep that mandate, because they can buy quite a bit. And don't forget, Greater Boston Food Bank, it's not just going to them, it's going to all of their food banks that they participate, and we expect this to expand. So I'm so glad this Story mentioned about the next round of grants, because by that time, we should be ready, moving and going, and see what happens and what processors are doing, and if they can get that machine. Some people I know are looking at the machines already In Gloucester at the State Fish Fair, they rent space, Jim Brew was looking at it also with.
Sabathia, just because of time, do you want to?
So, I talk too much anyway.
No, no, it's all good.
But the fact is that we are looking at it, we need to work on it and don't give up. Because we did do a lot of hard work on it. Its frustration is, it's not gonna save today and we're working on it and hopefully it's starting January.
Great, thank you. Right. Dan, I think Dan identified the tasks of this focus group. So do you want to just list those off real quick?
Well, we talked about trying to get chefs to put flatfish back on the menus, promote flatfish to consumers, which we're doing, but putting it out on social media, is that enough? Or can everybody in this all these other organizations who are presented, can you guys also amplify that? Convene a group of processors and talk about what their critical needs are. Make cutting machines a priority for FSIG in a future grant round. And then finally, seek institutional purchases by government. As some of the Gloucester folks have mentioned, you've got the redfish, the pollock. And that made a big difference in the years when that money was available.
We've had some preliminary discussions with some of the leadership at USDA, so then there was a lot of local turnover, so that, we need to
Clear
do
that.
those conversations, but that was a year and a half ago when, and similarly, it's just the minute that the purchasing program stopped, the price on pollock collapsed, I mean, haddock collapsed, and haddock wasn't just, the good thing about those purchasing programs is that it helps everyone. It just brings the price up, everyone. You have less variability, whether you're part of that purchasing program or not. It really just, it's a very beneficial program for the fishery.
Just a random thought, I had heard this a few years ago, the Boston hospitals stopped serving Icelandic cod to their patients because they found it had more salt content because of the processing. What about reaching out to the hospitals in Boston?
So I think that's another good institutional sales potentially. So schools, states, army, Air Force, et cetera. So what's that?
Correction.
Yeah, corrections, good point. So I think who's interested in potentially joining a focus group? I think Story sounds like you might be the lead. Beth, you're interested. Other folks on this group, Roger.
Can't help it.
But I really don't.
We need to bring the New Bedford process.
To Bedford in, so either Gordon or John or somebody. Okay, so we've got those names written down. Ed, final word on this and we'll give people a break.
Yeah.
Just by the fact that the food security grant issue came up, I'm not sure if it has come out, but the public announcement of who actually got awarded those food security grants, I don't believe has come out. I would like to see it publicized. I know last year it didn't come out until almost the end of October. So if anyone could make sure that that happens, I think it's important for people to see where the money goes, who's getting it and what they're getting it for. It gives other people ideas. So the sooner that could get out, that would be great.
Great, thanks, Ed. All right,
Quick thing, can we add Safathia to that focus group?
Yeah, and I was thinking of adding Frank too. Very good. So Fatih, Frank, and then the other folks that were mentioned, and then we'll get those names to you. And Dan's got the good kind of list of things to work on. Okay, let's take a 5-minute break. What I'm going to do is I'd like to actually, if Commissioner's okay and Benita from Ag's okay, I think we'll have you guys go next, and then we'll go offshore wind after that. If that's okay. Okay, thanks everybody. 5-minute break. Please eat some food, juice, whatever. I don't think we're bringing you lunch today, right? So there were two related things people asked to cover there is the biodiversity plan for the Commonwealth that just came out with full disclosure. We worked with the commissioner on that as well. I think Tom is going to share a little bit about that and how that's related particularly to our work here at the commission. And so Commissioner, I will turn it over. I know we're slowly gathering people up, but turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Pat. And thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time. I think this is mostly just for everybody's awareness to see how this relates to our commercial fisheries. And it's really a great place to be. I would say Massachusetts is leading the way along with some, really nation leading goals. And we had an announcement. It was good to see other people at the announcement in August on the Cape for the biodiversity goals with the governor. And I appreciate many of you who were there. And what's really great about it is, I think we are recognizing that biodiversity is relevant for our health and well-being, our food security, and our economy. And I think you all get that. And that's really why I'm here to sort of look to your support and to your engagement on these goals. So next slide. So, it was back in September 2023, right out there, actually, on that deck area, that Governor Healy announced an executive order charging the Department of Fish and Game to come up with goals for biodiversity conservation for 2030, 2040, and 2050, and to include our marine and coastal areas in that executive order, which we did. And this is something that is really furthering a movement, not only in Massachusetts, but globally, recognizing that in addition to climate crisis, there is a biodiversity crisis and nature loss crisis that's going to underpin much of our way of life, and the health of our environment and our economy and food security, as I've said. So it's really important that we make the connection that biodiversity is also important, as is climate, and those two things became part of the Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll's administration priorities, which is great. And that was one of the things that I wanted to bring when I came in as commissioner, to make that possible. And it was really great to see that come to fruition. Next slide. Yep, this was the event, Cape Cod. We had over 200 people from representing organizations across the state, including our commercial fisheries industry. I know some of you were there, and really appreciated that. It was a great opportunity for us to all get behind these goals. And I think people were really excited to really see, that we're going to put an investment in nature and the environment to support productivity and biodiversity, which is so important. And I think that this was a real testament to that. And also, I think it really shows there was a real demand for this from the public. We heard from over 2,000 people when we went out and did public engagement. So I think you're seeing some of the excitement for that. Let's see, next slide. So this is a slide we put up, but just, to let everybody know, they say, what is biodiversity? It's really the extraordinary abundance and variety of life, which we have and we're blessed with here in Massachusetts, including in our coastal areas, which are some of the potentially most productive places in the United States. As you all know, our ex-vessel seafood value of over, $600 million ranks as number 2 in the country, next to Alaska. So, I think we all know that this is possible because we have this great abundance of fisheries and life in our oceans. If you go to the next slide, I think it's important just to recognize we have a lot all around us, and that is, we have 1,500 miles of coastline, 8,000 miles of river, 3 million acres of forest, 2,500 square miles of ocean water, 45,000 acres of salt marsh. So all this stuff combines to actually make and support our coastal fisheries. So we think about it, it's not just in the oceans, it's all of our coastal communities, our rivers, our marshes, all of that is contributing to a more productive fisheries and marine environment. I think we all know we're called the Bay State for a reason. And so I really think it's important to connect biodiversity and our commercial fisheries together is relevant. Sometimes people think biodiversity, I don't need to worry about that. That doesn't really affect the industry, but they're tied together. And I think to the extent that we can continue to, and I think, for many of us on those more near shore coastal areas, like our shellfish industry, understand that connection as well. So this is a really important moment. And I would say that also we know that we have some incredible biodiversity hotspots like Stellwagen Bank, National Marine Sanctuary. We have to care for our critically endangered North Atlantic right whale. We have a lot of anadromous fish, historic rivers, and we are home to the iconic and beloved horseshoe crab, which I know a lot of people have paid a lot of attention to. But if you go to the next slide, I want to just point out that there is a lot of value to our environment, particularly around biodiversity, healthy communities, climate resilience, outdoor recreation in Massachusetts, $13.2 billion economy. And then our fisheries, which I had just mentioned earlier, and in terms of jobs, 8.3 billion for the blue economy. So it's in no part, disconnected from biodiversity. If we saw that our biodiversity from our forage fish all the way to our marine invertebrates and habitat was going away, you'd see those numbers drop ultimately. So I think we need to make that connection, that this isn't just an environmental thing. This is also something connected to our economy. Go to the next slide. So as we developed these goals, and during that process, I just want to point out that we had great involvement from our Division of Marine Fisheries. They were part of a biodiversity working group. Pat Field himself was engaged in this. Thank you, Pat. And then we had a whole government approach where we engaged all the secretariats, including the other EDA agencies. We came up with these sort of 4 pillars: protect, restore, sustain, and connect. So I'm going to go through the goals for each of those. But I think the overall vision here is that we're going to try to work to make things better tomorrow than they are today. And that's where we create this nature positive future. But this is the idea that we're going to try to improve those habitats, improve those conditions over time. And that we don't always have to be thinking about things as stopping a net loss, and so that's where we're focused on. And then I'll just say the sustain and connect parts are really, again, making this relevant to why we should all care about it, how we all benefit from biodiversity. So go to the next slide. There's a number of scales. I won't get into all of this with you, but it's from the most local biodiverse areas, which could be your backyard gardens and community gardens and pollinator gardens, to large landscape level areas such as our southeast Massachusetts Pine Barrens and the Appalachian Mountain region, which goes through the western part of our state. So from the big to the small, but we need to be strategic and focused on those areas where we need to protect and restore. That's a big component of all this at different levels. But, as I've often said, all this happens at a local level. It doesn't happen at some big conceptual state level. It happens in someone's community, and it happens in some area close by people care about that affect the people who go there to make a living, a way of life, so it's really important that we think about connecting our stakeholders and communities to this, which is why I think we had so many people, interested in this initiative. So I'm going to go through each of the goals really quickly under protect, restore, sustain, and connect, give you some examples. So one of the things on protect is we talked about these ideas of, are there special areas in terms of marine habitats that need to be in some way protected because they help support our fisheries, support our marine biodiversity environment. And there are things called marine protected areas, in California. But we just want to understand, is there something we need to be doing there? And we realize that we need to bring folks like you together, kind of tell us where those areas could be. Because we also don't want to just say, well, this is where we think they should be. We need to involve everybody in sort of a coalition or a task force to help us develop what do we really need to protect for the future. We have the ocean management planning, which CCM is leading right now. And I know that kind of gets at this concept, but there might be other concepts we haven't thought of that might not need regulations, but could still serve the same benefit of protecting important productive areas. And then the other we heard is that we don't know where they all are, and we need to continue to map some of these important marine habitats. And the other one that I've been facing a lot of, and I know our shellfish industry has faced a lot of, is just, the impact of various pollution and, outfalls and combined sewage overflows. So all this I know is a challenge in terms of our industry, particularly in the shellfish aquaculture side. So we need to really also be thinking the long term. And there are a number of goals with strategies and specific implementation tasks that were called out in the report. So if you want to go and look at that, you really should, because there's a lot in there you can dive into. On restoration, we're going to continue to elevate and set a goal of trying to restore all our anadromous fish passage in all coastal watersheds by 2050. So that's a pretty ambitious plan. That's basically removing a lot of the barriers and dams that prevent fish passage in all these coastal areas, rivers. The other was restoring our most important habitats. And right now, I'm working with DMF team and Bob Glenn around this concept of establishing marine habitat restoration center in Salem at the Cap Cove facility. And other ways that we can scale, work with organizations that are trying to restore these habitats. And then continuing and supporting our artificial reef and oyster restoration efforts. And we're finding a lot of people are interested in seeing these as productive fishing areas and certainly additional habitat. So I try to make that connection that this is really about making more fish. So I just want everybody to hear that, because this is what these things will do, is help make more fish for the future. And that's really the goal here. In addition to biodiversity, but people, if you look at from forage fish all the way up, to tuna, the whole system matters, and we're trying to really get at that base level of productivity. Go to the next slide. We also really want to set out a very ambitious goal of no net loss of shellfish areas. And I know this is a challenge, but we got to put ambitious targets out there if we ever hope to meet them. Continuing to invest in working waterfronts and seafood marketing, we think is important to sustain our fisheries industry in Massachusetts and fisheries in general. And so this is really centered to the work you're doing here. And Share the Catch program, which is this idea of connecting biodiversity to food security. And you heard Spud, we talked a little bit about that. And the last goal, and really important goal, is that if we don't connect people, whether it's through their way of life and their jobs, or to importance in their communities, or that they get to connect with nature and really value it, whether it's in their neighborhoods, what they're learning at school, and can they become part of what we'll call the restoration workforce. Sometimes we heard about the green workforce, but we're thinking only in terms of energy development, green energy, but it's also restoration. It's also in fishing, when you think about it as well. And so all of this is connecting people, and we have some key strategies to do that, that you can learn more about. I'm happy to answer any other questions. Is there another slide? I think there is another slide. Yeah, and the other is that we have to finance a lot of this work, and federal funding for this right now is becoming less and less. And so finding innovative ways. Right now, we're working on a blue carbon finance program where the Commonwealth would sell carbon credits for, say, a Massachusetts company that wanted to offset their carbon emissions. And they would buy these credits, and we could help finance restoration of our salt marshes, which are really important for our marine fisheries as well. But those are the kind of innovative financing programs we're trying to put a value on biodiversity that people actually help pay for, because they realize there is a benefit to it. And then even investing in things like our cleanup of ghost fishing gear is really critical, and we're working. That was another thing I should have mentioned, that we can help fund through the Mass Ready Act, is cleanup of ghost gear. So we think that's going to help also in our marine fisheries, helps our coastal communities that have to deal with this. So I think there's a lot more we can do here. We just have to put our minds to it, agree that it's an important part of our goals, and get some money and resources behind it, which I think we're building momentum towards that. Having this commission is really important to that piece of it, because it gathers us all here together, and you can give me the feedback, and our department and marine fisheries the feedback of where we need to go and invest further in these goals. But I have to, give credit to Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll for basically saying, yeah, we think this is an important administration priority. That puts them at the national leadership level right now, because we're not seeing that level of investment prioritization come from the federal government at this point in time. So I think it's great that we have this at least happening at the state level. So with that, any
questions?
Just one small twist, Commissioner, the slide that talked about restoring eelgrass. We also want to protect eelgrass, and DMF, working with the Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission, is proposing to sort of reimagine how we manage our surf clam fishery. No surf clam captain worth his salt or herself is going to go into an eelgrass bed. Sometimes it happens, and so we want to map them, and we're proposing putting trackers on the vessels and set up a geofencing approach, so when the boat crosses over, they'll be notified to avoid, because that's going to be eelgrass on the seafloor. So it's gonna be innovative and I think effective at protecting what we have.
It's very good. That's a great example.
Ed, you have a question online?
Yeah, Tom. I was at the event down in down the Cape. You know, I served on Stillwagon Sanctuary Advisory Council during a time when we went through a management plan. I guess that was just still a management plan. But whenever I see these things, I always have to think the devil's in the details. And I kind of, you know, and I think that, you know, we need to see the details of this thing. Because, and I'm sure everyone at DMF and Fish and Wildlife understand how many rules and regulations we have that govern us. But I don't think, I'm not sure the executive office understands that. And when we start to talk about critical habitat and this and that, I get nervous. To tell you the truth. So, you know, the sooner we can get details about how this plan is going to be initiated, you know, I think the level of angst about this thing might come down quite a bit.
Yeah, that's a fair point, Ed. And I mean, I'm happy. I know they only want to slot about 10 minutes or so for me. I could have one of my team come in and give a little more detail as to exactly the strategies and the plans that were laid out for the next, you know, 5 years. And we can get into that detail, Ed, so you can see it. I just didn't want to take too much time today with that, but happy to do it. Yeah.
And Ed, I think one thing is that on the question of, so I know the word MPAs is as a 4-letter word, marine protected areas. I do think that this plan tries to look at things as a partnership to work together.
That's right.
Not to impose and regulate, and it's really built, I think, on partnership and effort together versus, you know, the powers on high regulate. But as you said, Ed, the devil's in the details. So I think if people want a longer presentation later, I put actually the connection to the actual more detailed plan in the chat, and then we can follow up here how we carry on.
But that's right. We want to do this as a partnership, not as a sort of top down. So we want engaging conversation with all of you. Right. And actually, I think it's more about investing in the habitat, you know, restoration as much as it is any of the protection. So.
Yeah. All right. Ed, any follow-up before we move on?
No, I'm all set.
Great, thanks, Ed. Beth.
He answered it. It's about the marine protected areas. We can talk later.
Okay. Good. Yeah, again. And I don't believe the plan calls out for.
So it doesn't, but I just thought I'd put that word out there because.
I know it's very bold of you. I mean,
They think it, so I'm just putting it out there that what we're really.
That said what we were all thinking, we're like, oh.
Yeah, I know. So I said, I'm just gonna say it.
Good for you. I like
You know,
the boldness.
I mean, I'm not gonna shy away.
Jackie didn't totally fall off her chair.
Yeah.
I think what people are thinking of is, you know, strict regulations. I think I want to think about this in a new way that sees it as a partnership of how we work together to make sure that we all recognize these are areas that probably need maybe a different type of use or to, you know, and maybe not. So, but in terms of restoration, there are areas I think we can agree that we don't have as many eelgrass beds as we used to. And we ought to have more of them back and that it would help the fisheries. So it's things like that. And that's why we said convene a task force so that we could sort of, you know, I know you already have enough on your plate, but I don't think it would be a huge effort to sort of say, hey, this is where we think as an industry would help. And Dan brought up a good example of one of those.
No, that's good.
Okay, thank you for saying the word.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. That was good. Everyone's everything's like, we didn't bring any liquor for lunch, but maybe we.
I know.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Okay, moving on. We're gonna move to ag, and I appreciate Benita being here to really talk a little bit about something we really want to hear from some of the other agencies that engage with fisheries and seafood in some fashion. And so we're really excited to have her here to explain a little bit about one of the programs there. So I'm gonna turn it over to you. And Benita, can you hear us okay?
Thank you. And can you see the slides?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to join the Commercial and Fisheries Commission.
Oh, Benita, sorry, we've got you we're seeing like your, it's in your notes is not just the single slideshow.
Okay.
If you click on slideshow below, that might work. If not, you may have to do that, then rejoin the share. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Let's see.
Bradley, what you should do.
Actually, Benita, I have them if you want me to share in the room. Is that easier?
Sure, that's great. Thanks so much.
No problem. There we go. All right, over to you.
Well, they can't see it yet. One.
Oh, they can't see it. We can see it.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right.
I would just say, yeah, thank you to the Commercial Fisheries Commission for this opportunity to talk about some of the programs that we have at Mass Department of Ag Resources that really overlap with the Division of Marine Fisheries. My name is Benita Elke. I work for the Division of Agricultural Markets, and I also manage the Massachusetts Food Policy Council. And you might know that legislative members of the Food Policy Council are working to add a fisheries seat, since seafood is really a critical part of the Massachusetts food system. In the meantime, Wendy is a regular attendee, and she has presented on several occasions. And recently she shared that through MDAR's FSIG program, the Food Security Infrastructure Grant, around $24.5 million has been awarded to commercial fisheries and shellfish over the past 5 years. So again, we're happy to have the partnership with DMF, and we are under the same secretariat. Next slide, please. The program, the USDA program that has deep pockets, it was funded it's been funded steadily at $200 million. The MAP program in the Farm Bill, and has had additional funding recently through the Regional Ag Promotion Program. Again, deep pockets, and the funding is secure. It is distributed to about 60 or 70 USDA cooperators that represent specific commodities or products, including Food Export USA Northeast, which is the commodity group that we're a member of, we being Mass Department of Ag Resources. And under the umbrella of Food Export is all value-added products, seafood products, and some value-added wood products. Commissioner Ashley Randall from MDAR is on the board of directors. She's a secretary currently. And we have been promoting and managing seafood programs as part of these funds since 2004. Next slide, please. It's important because seafood is a significant export for Massachusetts, probably about at least 300 million annually over the past 5 years, with the top export destinations being Canada, China, Italy, France, and Spain, and the market destinations varying depending on the species. Next slide, please. Massachusetts food companies, agriculture companies, seafood companies are awarded around $1 million every year, with a portion of those going directly to seafood. So over the past 5 years, it's almost $1.3 million that have been granted to seafood companies through the branded program. And in the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about how that works. For seafood, products have to be 100% US origin, and that's because it is a program supporting American agriculture, food processing, and seafood. If it is processed seafood, like a chowder company, for example, at least half of the ingredients have to be US grown or harvested by weight, excluding water and packaging. And the program mainly focuses on small to medium-sized businesses based on a Small Business Administration definition, which is actually pretty large. But we still have an opportunity to work with some of our very large businesses in some certain situations. There's an administrative fee, a percentage of the funding that's requested, and a marketing plan that is required in the application to have 50% of eligible expenses reimbursed. And awards range from $5,000 to $300,000. Probably the average is $40,000 to $60,000. And awards are based on state committee approval. So I'm on the Massachusetts committee and have an opportunity to understand the objectives of our businesses. Next slide, please. The funds for 50% cost share reimbursement are a variety of activities that you would use to promote your business anywhere. In this case, they're focused on supporting expenses for outside of the US, international websites, packaging and labeling, advertising, public relations, in-store promotions, marketing and point-of-sale materials, and half the costs of these for exhibiting at international trade shows, as well as half the cost for 2 supplier representatives for airfare, lodging, and per diem. Branded funds are also eligible for US shows where international buyers are in attendance. So that would include Seafood Expo North America, National Restaurant Association, Summer Fancy Food Show, for example. And this is a popular use of the program because it supports meeting buyers and getting a sense of the opportunity for suppliers' products, but it also allows a chance to meet with regional and national customers and develop new businesses. We also have, as part of the all of these shows, we bring buyers from other countries based on nominations from our network of in-country market representatives whose job is trade servicing, to know trends and to understand the market conditions. So they'll recommend buyers that we'll host to come to these meetings, and suppliers can look at what's on the buyer shopping list, choose who they'd like to meet with, and we'll set up a schedule. We typically have an educational program for the buyers that are visiting too, and Deputy Director Story Reed is often a participant in our educational programs talking about seafood. Next slide, please. In addition to the cost share program, to the branded program that really infuses funds directly into the company's marketing budget, there are other services that can help suppliers really understand what the opportunities are, where they should be thinking about exporting, what the top markets are, who the importers are, what the competitive market pricing is for similar products, what the packaging looks like, and if they'd like, they can be hosted in their country of interest to really meet with importers and buyers to further their business opportunities. I mentioned the one-on-one buyer meetings. which are very popular because it's a very low cost, low risk way to get a lot of feedback about the possibility of a supplier product in that buyer's market. Next slide, please. We've had, this is just a list of some of the fish and shellfish suppliers that we've worked with over the years through the branded program or through many of the other programs. If you are interested, or if you know any businesses that are interested, I'll share my email at the end of this presentation, and I'd be happy to talk about the programs and services in more detail. Next slide, please. We've been working with Wendy to promote Massachusetts at Seafood Expo North America since 2019. Again, we have a buyer mission that supports this event, as well as a buyer education program. And we've really enjoyed working with Division of Marine Fisheries, as our commissioners have had a walkthrough for the show and really taken advantage of meeting the exhibiting suppliers to get an understand of what their challenges are and what their opportunities are. I'd also mention that last week we hosted EU and UK sustainability journalists interested in conveying the US commitment to sustainability. And on our tour, this group was 8 journalists. They were in Massachusetts for 3 days. We included a tour to an oyster farm, a scallop business, and a meeting with Dr. Stokesbury to talk about the sustainability in the scallops industry. We also had a seminar at Tufts that included Deputy Director Story Reed, MDR Commissioner Ashley Randall, and then Professor Tim Griffin to dive a little deeper into sustainability topics in general, and then within the agencies. And Story talked about the new biodiversity executive order, which was really interesting. We're also working on a first time November oyster month, and we'll share details with you about that, especially considering some of the messages that are on point from the biodiversity plan. And we're looking to have a governor's proclamation and then a special event at the Copley Farmers Market on November 7th, and we'll share more information about that. So I would just say that we appreciate the partnership with Division of Marine Fisheries and all of the collaborative opportunities. And I'm happy to follow up with anyone who's interested in more information about any of the topics that I touched on today. So thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thanks, Benita. Any questions for Benita right now for MDR? All right, thank you so much for that program. Really appreciate it. Thanks, and thank you for the time, Benita, and the switch in schedules as well. Okay, now we're going to move to everybody's favorite topic, offshore wind. It's right after the protected areas. So the Brad Amateur review, we're going to do a kind of update on where things are. Last time we had some ideas for where we could go with this group and offshore wind, so I want to put those forward in front slide and see where we want to go with this. And then if we have time, and if we don't, it's okay. We have set up a specific webinar with the Regional Fund Administrator for October, and that's actually on the group, but to really have you all weigh in on where they're heading on some of their specific program design pieces. So I want to give you some prep slides if we have time. If not, we'll find another way to get it to you ahead of time.
I think it's November 3rd.
November 3rd. Okay, great.
All right. Thank you. For those of you I have not met before, mostly online, my name is Brad Schongelmeyer. I'm the offshore wind and fisheries specialist at Mass DMF. And this is a presentation, just some updates on the ongoing construction of offshore wind farms to our south and then a couple of projects that we are working on internally, and it's updated as of last week. So next slide. Just an overview of the projects in the Northeast here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 under construction in blue there. From east to west, that's Vineyard Wind. The ship looking one is Revolution Wind. Below that is Sunrise Wind, and off towards New York, that is Empire Wind. Under complete operation is South Fork Wind, and that's been operable for over a year now. The sites that are currently under construction are undergoing monopile foundation installations, cable routing, cable laying, construction of wind turbines themselves, and offshore substations are being constructed and commissioned as we speak. There are a handful of other offshore wind projects that do not have their full suite of permits, and considering the federal climate on offshore wind right now, those are not expected to reach a construction phase anytime soon. And then in addition to that, there are other projects that are further down the road, do not have construction or operations plans submitted. We'll give some more detail about the ongoing construction projects right here. Vineyard Wind, as of last week, was still installing nacelles and blades on some of their turbines. They're also still swapping out blades from the manufacturer that had some faulty construction manufacturing practices. In addition to that, they still have cables to lay, and they are, at last report, potentially up to half of the turbines are transmitting power. Off to our west or southwest is Empire Wind. They are currently doing seabed preparation, including scour protection, and installing turbines and transition pieces, or sorry, not turbines, monopile foundations and transition pieces. Next slide. And then the Ørsted projects. Revolution, as you may have heard, there was a federal stop work order on August 22nd. 1 month after that, there was a federal judge that granted a preliminary injunction, which lifted that stop work order, and work began later that day. They are currently installing the wind turbines. They received their second offshore substation, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, and that is installed and being commissioned as we speak. And they are laying inter-array cables as well to complete that project, which I think the timeline is still for next year, full completion. And then Sunrise Wind really started this spring, and they are still installing the foundations, transition pieces, and then they received their offshore substation about a month ago. That's been installed, and they are currently commissioning it. Yep. In the Gulf of Maine here, we've had some movement, but not a lot in terms of planning for a timeline for construction. Right now, we've had communications plans from Avangrid communicated, and we've had meetings about that. And then last week, we had a meeting with Invenergy, who has the lease areas in green there, about their communications plan as well. They have websites that you can go to, you can see them there. And then the main research array, they are conducting trawl survey right now. So another project that we're working on at Mass DMF is administering the Fisheries Innovation Fund. Initially, the Fisheries Innovation Fund was $1.75 million mitigation fund created by Vineyard Wind in order to support programs and projects that ensure safe and profitable fishing continues as current and future offshore wind projects are developed. Back in May, we met with our advisory panel to narrow the priorities of our first solicitation down to fishing innovation, community, and safety. We published the first RFP as solicitation number 1 on July 7th. That application period closed on August 29th, and we ended up receiving 20 proposals that sought $3.37 million or thereabouts. We are currently in the review stage and hope to advise our trustee of the fund, Director McKiernan, with potential awardees by the end of October, or probably at this point, early November. The contracts and statement of work will be developed over the course of November and December, and then projects should be able to begin in January 2026. And there will be messaging, I would imagine, from EEA somewhere in the November period. And then one other task we picked up about a month ago, I wanted to make this Commercial Fisheries Commission aware of, is essentially finalizing guidance on AIS, the beacons on wind turbines. It was brought to my attention that some work had been done on this primarily by the Rhoda Joint Industry Task Force back in 2020. I'm sure some of you participated in that project, whereby surveys about offshore wind were delivered to 40 or more commercial fishing entities. Most of those respondents favored offshore or AIS beacons on all offshore wind turbines, as long as they could be turned off if it became too cluttered. The loop was never really closed on that. The federal guidance never really reflected some of that efforts. In 2021, we saw BOEM guidance saying that AIS transponders should be placed on all significant peripheral structures, which are the ones in red in that diagram, or other significant locations within the wind energy facility, and should be capable of transmitting signals marking the locations of all structures within the facility. Also, the transponder should be approved by Coast Guard based on the recommendation from the respective district office. That left a little bit of room for interpretation. Further, in 2023, the Coast Guard's guidance said that AIS aids to navigation signals indicate each SPS, and where a wind farm borders a fairway or has a designated vessel route, that lane may be marked with additional AIS signals. And then the intermediate peripheral structures within the wind farm may also be marked with AIS signals. So that said, the guidance allowed room for interpretation between developers, whereby the application or implementation by developers might not be consistent between wind farms. Knowing these wind farms abut each other, I think I've heard from enough fishermen that consistent guidance from our federal partners is probably pretty important. So that's why we are planning to convene either a working group or a one-day workshop, get the experts on AIS in the room to educate everybody, and then have a discussion that could lead to guidance coming out of the Massachusetts Fisheries Working Group to the Coast Guard, BOEM, Bessie, in order to update that guidance so we could ask the developers to reference that in the future. I've had really good feedback from the developers who are just asking to for us to point to something so that they could implement it. And so that's where we are right now. It's hit a bit of a holdup. The engagement I was hoping for from the industry side is slowly coming to bear. But I'm going to be looking for more industry representatives, primarily from the southern New England area and the South Coast, because of their experience working in these areas. But if anybody in the room wants to participate, I'd be willing to include.
And Brad, is your thought you're gonna have a work group or a workshop or maybe some combination?
Probably a one-day workshop should do it, I think. Yeah, I don't want to draw this out any longer than it has to. I'll be working with Lane Johnston from Rhoda on this. We're probably going to be co-leading it. And we both agree that we want to have the room full of experts to get it done right rather than do it quickly.
On this last one, any interest in just letting you know if you want to engage with any of those issues specifically around navigation? I know this was an issue, and the technology got complicated because there's AIS and other various kinds of shadowing, whatever they were called. It got very confusing.
I have a suggestion.
Yep.
Can you do it during the closure?
The lobster closure, February 1 through May 1st.
So we'll try to avoid fishing season.
Yeah, that could be a timeline.
How does that work for groundfish?
February.
February, okay.
It's 12 months for us, but I mean, for I would do a one-day workshop if.
Yep.
You wanted somebody from. The north.
Yep.
And we could get some.
Yeah, I
thoughts
would
about that.
definitely be interested in that.
Sam, you're interested? Yeah, you're using somebody very totally appropriate for.
So Brad, you and I spoke earlier, I was wondering, given the performance of the federal government right now, which is kind of predictable on this, on some of these issues, I'm wondering if maybe like a group of states could kind of come together and maybe force the issue as like those that are buying the power, so that would be New York, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Mass.
Yep.
Would be the four.
Well, there's Virginia as well, but we could certainly,
But in southern New England, in
Yes,
this array,
yes.
it would be those four states.
Yeah, we could certainly, have those conversations, see if they want, what participation levels they want in this, and see whatever other leverages we have to get this consistent implementation of one technology. It's,
In the southern England area right now, the active developers are Vineyard and Orsted.
yes.
And then Equinor is in Pine, so. All right, so again, I think trying to do it in a less intensive fishing season sounds important. It's great you're working with Rhoda, kind of a fishery association, which is excellent. And it sounds like maybe some voluntary action, at least in the southern England area, to start among everybody that's consistent would be a start, if not to try to do more than that, given the federal government's whatever it says.
right, and it's not a commercial fishery only issue, right? We have rec and for hire that use the areas, with different technologies on their boats as well, so.
Yeah, other questions, that's great, that's moving forward. Let Brad know, okay.
Not related to that specifically in AIS, but I'm just curious how in the areas that are operational today, what has been the engagement of the fishing industry in the construction plan for those lease areas? Like, how is the state of Mass engaged the fishing industry in those? And was that through BOEM? Was that through, that predates you, Brad?
Yep.
But I'm just curious how the industry was engaged in that.
In the actual-
How were the wind arrays lined out? What was the, thought on, cables between, how was the industry involved in that construction comment alignment with the Commonwealth process?
Well, that was what we focused on a slew of meetings of the fisheries working group. And I think at one point, that was even before my time in the role that I play now, but the 1 mile spacing was kind of came out of those discussions and concerns, because we need to navigate through them, and some even felt it'd be more likely to fish with a 1 mile spacing, but others didn't agree with that. But it was through the other group, the fisheries working group on offshore wind. Oh, were you?
We started facilitating, probably after that.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
I went, I was never officially a member of that group, so I listened when I could listen to some of those calls, but I wouldn't.
Most of those were held down south, where all the development was going.
The first meetings were with Scott Lang was mayor of New Bedford. He formed a fishery commission that we were on, and there was a bunch of different fishermen looking, and I was on it. We were looking at the distributions of fish, and that's what kind of cut the dog in half, that original one. And then that evolved into that group. But the industries also, like Vineyard and Orsted, they also had their own kind of working groups and facilitated groups to discuss it. And then BOEM had those on top of that. So it was kind of a mishmash that, it wasn't a uniform as it certainly could have been. That was my perception.
For what it's worth, my big sense of the sequence was that the mayor originally convened a group which tried to work on this particular question of spacing and transit through. And that held to some degree, but had challenges. So Bruce at Mass CC, maybe at CC at the time, Bruce Gallup tried to form a group. They also had a discussion trying to get to agreement and struggled. Then Rhoda brought me in, and we tried again to get an answer on the spacing, particularly transit lanes between the project, which BOEM frankly, I think mistakenly put them right together, which was a mistake. I'll just state that, because there's no transit space between them, and New York Bite's better because of that, but not so good for New England. And that got very close and also failed. And then at long last, one by one popped out really from the industry itself. And, you know, at that time, Ed LeBlanc was at Coast Guard. He's since moved obviously to Orsted, but, and so that was the answer that came out with this sort of directionality to, I think, trying to meet some fishermen's interests, but not others. There were no transit lanes between because they already got the lease and they felt like they already paid for the space. We couldn't get them to give up a little bit for transit, frankly. And so we ended up where we ended up. I do think there's always been a challenge for the role of fishermen and the question of microsighting. So once they've got the lease and they've got the COP, what's the role of fishermen and actually the microsighting within the lease itself? And I think that's always been murky at best.
Well, that's where I feel like we should have say as a commission, so.
There was the Coast Guard that came down with that 1 mile space.
It was, yes.
I mean, it was on fishermen's bites, but they were the ones who decided no transit.
I think that's right. I think the Coast Guard ultimately kind of, yeah.
And now BOEM and NOAA have a program, a computer program that is supposed to overlay all the different fishing interests in the area and the energy interest, and it produces them all. So for the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of Maine, they're starting to use that. I feel that that's more cumbersome.
And that's the in-cost model Jackie's pretty familiar with in terms of, and that's what they use for siting for the Gulf of Maine.
Right, for the site.
And it still doesn't answer the question of once you've sited it, right?
Yeah.
Ed, do you have a question?
I have a comment. Yeah, BOEM basically came and said, this is what you're stuck with. There was no real interaction with fishermen as far as sighting and spacing. It was, I would say, a rigged game from the get-go. You know, people might disagree with that statement, but that's my feeling. Secondly, you know, as long as we're talking about offshore wind, and I know this is anecdotal, but with Vineyard Wind constructed as much as it has, we had a fluke season this year that our quota was only 550,000 pounds, which is not that much. Generally, quotas back in the day when there were 5 days a week fishing and 300-pound limits, a quota like that generally wouldn't last till end of July. As of September, I think it was only 60% full. And to every person I talked to who participated in that fishery, they all wanted to blame offshore wind. And where Vineyard Wind is located and where the cables come through, Muskeget, just south of Muskeget and Vineyard Sound, I think those are two areas where the fluke come into Nantucket Sound. And so here's the question, I guess. The question is, how long do we have this anecdotal evidence before someone actually says, well, yeah, you were impacted? I mean, is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? I mean, will that fishery exist as far as participants go in 5 years or 10 years? If it continues to be the CPUE has been greatly reduced. You know, again, we had 500 pounds and the quota was 500 pounds. I forgot to mention that, as opposed to 300 pounds. So there's been a drastic reduction in the catch, and something's causing it. So, you know, I guess that's the question. How long does it go? How long, when do we say, no, this had a negative effect?
Brad, do you want to talk all about monitoring plans post-construction?
Sure, yeah, there are, each developer has their own monitoring plans, which may or may not include research specific to EMF or cable corridors, like you're mentioning here. There are two projects on the Orsted cables that that have landfall on Long Island in New York, where they use acoustic telemetry to tag either benthic invertebrates or also fish, including sharks, to see how an electrified cable, what impact it may have on their maintenance. So We're interested in the results of those projects. However, one of those cables is yet to be electrified. So right now they're in the control period. I would say it would be a couple of years before we have any sort of scientific sense of the impact of EMF on those specific species and those two projects. I understand that Vineyard Wind is its own different animal as far as the cable corridor and the electrification of that cable. So, yeah, that's all I can say to that.
Are they doing any preliminary studies on the cable corridor before they get electrified?
Yeah.
Water temperature,
Yeah, there are,
stuff like that.
right, yes, there are surveys before when they're after they've selected the cable corridor, which already goes through its own process of micrositing. And then, they monitor the cable corridor before construction.
I guess I think one thing this group, I mean, right now, I don't think there's a lot of results, but I think in the coming months, or like you said, years. To Ed's point, hopefully there will be more data that people can look at. Won't be perfect, probably won't answer a lot, but it'll answer something. So something this group can think about trying to track and get involved when there's data to look at. I just want to, because I'm aware of time, so I just want to go through what's next for offshore wind in this group. So this is some slides provided.
Can I say one more thing?
Oh, Ed, yeah, go for it, Ed. Sorry, I didn't see it.
But I mean, that's my frustration here, is if we're waiting for data, we could be waiting a decade. We could be, Kevin can attest to how long it takes to, and in the meantime, we don't have that kind of time. I'm sorry, we don't have that kind of time. The fishing, especially the trawling industry, is very vulnerable right now. And, you could, I mean, there's an impact happening, and I don't know what, how long do we wait?
And I don't have a good answer for you. I don't know if anybody wants to.
Maybe we have like just an update at our next meeting on what is occurring right now for monitoring what exists. And how to weigh in on that, because that is really critical. I mean, we have different projects right now. We have projects that are already construction's occurring and they're operational. So what are we learning from that? We've got, what did we learn from their construction? How is the industry working with them, not with them? What is the transmit? I mean, there's a huge learning opportunity there, impacts there that we can try to understand and address before other areas are constructed. I mean, it's good that we have a pause right now, and because things were going so fast before. So now let's learn from what occurred, what was good and bad, what's the impacts from the existing projects, and how are we, before these other lease areas are constructed, how do we work together and make recommendations, or how does this commission weigh in on those construction plans? And I mean, there's just an opportunity here, I think, right, that we don't want to miss.
Yeah, and these are some of the smaller, in the weeds. We talk about individual projects at the fisheries working group meetings. The developers like to do the presentation themselves, or, ask their partners, SMAS or whoever else, to do the presentations. And they are really interesting in what they've learned, what they're learning, and what they hope to learn. But once again, the timeline of science, especially when you're doing a before and after study, is sometimes not as fast as we want it. I can understand that.
Well, they're 7-year projects at least, let me say. So we've surveyed the pre-construction of Vineyard Wind. And we surveyed 1 year during the construction. And now we're just about to start 3-year post-construction. So I've been thinking about that as well, about how much science have we learned, and how much on a specific scale that wasn't really covered before, because the scale that we're working on is much finer than the Fishery Service, for example. But Brad, if you I can work with you on the next presentation.
Absolutely, yeah. This is something I reach out to developers to all the time, but we can maybe pick and choose. And if you want to, give your opinion on what we'd like to hear about at the next fisheries working group or fisheries commission, we'll be there. We already have, I think, projects on the agenda for the next fisheries working group?
I think there'll be room.
Yeah, okay.
But I think that's good. So Kevin, I think if you would work with Brad, that's great. I realize under the contract with Vineyard, you may have some constraints what you can or can't share publicly yet. but
Well,
we'll figure it out.
not so much, no,
Good.
because we're
That's good.
a public university, so we have data sharing agreements with everyone that we work with. The data is all available and public for our students. But that meeting's not on the 3rd of November, is it?
No, the next one's December 12th.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And that'll be actually in New Bedford.
Oh, there you go.
So, don't
Yeah, we're back at that.
there's no excuse.
Well,
Roger.
how about, well, I have a question about mitigation. So what
Yeah, okay.
happens when we finally decide, let's just say that it does prove that there's a negative impact on these fishing communities? Where is there a plan for, a retrospective mitigation? I don't think so.
No.
Well,
No one's gonna get compensated. Everyone's just gonna say, sorry, guys, tough luck.
Ed, I think one thing to note-
I'm just saying, I'm not looking for any answers. I'm just saying
I'm
that
gonna give you
is the
one.
reality. That's the reality of offshore.
Ed, so if a fisherman feels they've been negatively impacted by an offshore wind project, they absolutely can go to the program administrator of the compensation program the program's run, and they can make their case. Now, whether they'll get compensated is another matter. I can't speak to that. But there are programs. Vineyards was pretty prescriptive, but they have a kind of tailored, individualized program if you believe you've been majorly impacted that you can go to. So there is a place to go. Whether it's sufficient is another question.
And whether you can prove it or whether they
Right.
will approve it, because you're going through the offshore wind developer. They're the ones who are saying, well, I don't agree with you.
Well, they do it. They hire a third-party administrator to write. The program rules are set by the developer. You're correct about that.
Yeah, well,
I would- No
that's
avenue.
fair.
The avenue is not simple.
Yeah, and Pat, I mean, a report from a commission like this could put that in their report as a noted issue or flag in the reports to the legislature, so.
Good, very good point. Ed, anything else if I go to Roger?
No, that was pretty much my point. 2 years down the road, the surveys come back and gee, there's a negative impact. Do they stop? Probably not. Now we're still monitoring.
But I have a question on that too, because it ties into the presentation we saw earlier on biodiversity. If it's a negative impact in shift in species and distribution, that's a shift in biodiversity. Does that tie into that other work?
Right. Good point.
So, and I'd be happy to work with Kevin on some of these larger questions, but the decline that we've seen in our inshore trawl fishery predated the construction. So we have fewer active boats right now. And then, so we need to look at that, the overall trend, in terms of participants in the fishery. Then we need to look at the abundance of the target species, because that has its own levels of fluctuation. So I don't want to fall into this causation correlation challenge. When a wind farm was built and fishing is worse than it was years prior, somehow it's a cause. So we have to look at that. And we have obviously trawl data within state waters to show changes in abundance of those fish. It's a great question, and
One thing leads to another, Dan.
sure, yeah.
Jackie, go ahead.
It's not only the biological changes, it's also the fishing practices changes. Aubrey can talk about this. I think she's a skate advisor, but that was one thing that was brought up a few weeks ago in Monkfish Skate advisory panel meetings, was just the impacts on steam time to fishing grounds, the impact to where they have to go, where their catch per unit of effort might be better in certain areas. The fishery impacts aren't just the biological ones but it's also, the economic from increase in steam time or where they're going for the fishing grounds now. It's a more broader.
That advisory panel keeps notes, correct? Because someone actually sent me some details from that
I
presentation.
think so. There should be. There was a huge offshore wind discussion, so there should be.
So maybe one of the things, and this maybe falls to DMF, maybe. turning to Dan, Brad, is that like, as these stories, whether they're apocryphal or data driven or both, doesn't matter. I think trying to gather up what people are hearing and saying and seeing would be good to collect, because they're kind of, it's popping up all over the place, right? And so the more that can happen, maybe that's one thing that could, both the monitoring data itself, but also stories come in council or advisory panels or whatever, might be useful to try to be gathering up. So that we're learning, and then everyone's fair point, you know, if 3 years later you prove something, but you're ran out of business the year before, it doesn't help them much. For sure. Okay, I'm aware of the time, so I'm gonna suggest this is we have an offshore wind group. We were kind of waiting to see if we get more direction from this group, but we're running out of time. So I've got a bunch of slides. I'm gonna convene that group pretty quickly after today in our focus group, and we'll talk about what you all think this group should do on offshore wind over the next 6 months to a year. The other thing that we didn't really get a chance to talk about is, and I do think this is important, so maybe it's gonna need to happen in our December meeting, is, you know, sometime in the first quarter of 2026, I think we owe the legislature a report. And the question is, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to talk about? What do you want in that report? What don't you? How do you want to have this commission have an impact? And purpose and meaning. I think today we had a really full and good agenda with lots of things. We've got a number of things coming up to talk about as well. But I want you all to think about, like, this is yours, right? This is yours. So I want you to think about fishermen in particular, what kind of impact you want on whom, and how this commission and we can help you do that.
I would hope the legislature would use this commission in a way that they could file improved legislation. You know, if there's a New Bedford interest that wants to file a bill, they, you know, coming here to they would make sure Boston, Gloucester, and Chatham all are buying into it, because all of our legislators have regional areas of expertise and concern. So, you know, one of the things I created when we made the Shellfish Advisory Panel was a sounding board for things that could go to the legislature, or the legislature could come to us. You know what I mean? Like, is this gonna work? So I hope it could be a two-way street where someone in the legislature could say, I've got this great idea for you know, to a fishing bill, and maybe we could help improve that and then enhance its chances.
Okay, so we've got, again, we've got the group that's gonna work with Story on ports. We've already got that going. We've got a new group kind of on the flatfish question. Brad invited other folks who want to talk about AIS with his group. We'll remind us all the action items. We're gonna reconvene the offshore wind group to figure out kind of where we go to from here. We do promise public comment. We're almost out of time, so what I want to do is provide 2 minutes each to anybody who wants to do that. We'll do some reminder of next meetings and stuff, and we'll close for your lunch of muffins. Is there anybody in the room who wants to make a public comment? Yeah, Aubrey. Oh, Aubrey, before you go ahead, sorry, Aubrey, go ahead.
All right, I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time or not. I just had a comment to share with the commission as other business, so I don't know if this is the time.
No. Now's perfect. As a member, go for it first. Go for
Okay,
it.
great. Yeah, I just wanted everyone to be aware. I think many of us wrote letters when the Coast Guard created that buoy removal plan. So they've recently resubmitted their downsized buoy removal plan, and they're looking for public comment through November 15th. Under the new plan, some buoys have been removed and from the list, and others are still on there, but I just wanted people to be aware. I think they had close to 3,000 public comments about concerns with their buoy removal. I think it was under the coastal buoy modernization proposal. So I think 121 of them were removed, but there's still 162 on the list. So I just wanted people to be aware, if you wrote comments and had concerns, which we did, in terms of navigational safety for mariners, I would encourage you to, again, provide comments before November 15th.
Great, Aubrey, thanks. Can you, if you send that to us, we'll just send it out to everybody. If you have the,
sure,
like the notice and all that, okay, we'll send it out to everybody. Thank you. Ed.
Excuse me. I just wanted to add it. I know I've said enough, but I just wanted to state how vulnerable our groundfish and trawling and fisheries are at this moment. You know, the cod, I've probably lost close to $600,000 in revenue from the cod, from, you know, the reduction in cod quota over the last 15 years. You know, we have fisheries like squid and fluke aren't doing well. You know, it leads to a lot of other problems. One thing leads to another, you know, boats drop out, infrastructure dies. We're really at a, you know, we're really at a disaster level in that fishing industry. You know, on the South Shore, we're going to look at a 3-month closure. Pretty much, I've talked to my brother yesterday, said that, you know, areas that we fish from Plymouth to Boston are pretty much closed right now due to other fishing gear. So, you know, we're really at a precipice that I think everyone needs to realize. That's it.
Thank you for being direct and clear about that. And even hearing Al's comment about prices, disturbing to say the least, in terms of that one species alone. So, and again, if the commission thinks there's additional things, given that Ed and others we need to do, including maybe meeting sooner, then you all let us know. Okay, I've got one comment in the room. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes and one comment online. So just state your name for the record, if you would.
Yes, Susanna Altenbogen, Boat and Friends. We've been designing boats at Gloucester since 1952. I'm bringing you a free gift for the year. But it has to be you the result of collaborative effort with folks in Gloucester, starting with fishermen. A 405-page white paper, which covers about 31 years worth of odd regulatory realities. If you take 34 ounces, it finds out the post office to document what's gone sideways, why we do not have a modern sustainable fishing. Well, the seafood of this fleet will eventually not be looked at very kindly in the seafood marketplace. Every boat will have a QR code, and it will show what metrics of sustainability you are coherent with. We've lost 31 years worth of fleet development. Therefore, we've lost 31 years worth of advanced economics, vessel operations, which therefore has produced 31 years worth of stagnation in fleet, in catch technology development. Because if your boat doesn't allow you to fish slow but far more selectively, where you only take the resource that is in adequate abundance, then you're going to be able to look very good at the archer nose. If the boats cost too much for you to even fish slow, if none of this matches, and none of it is matching as we speak, you're a problem. This is systemic. 31 years. Nobody in this room was responsible for things to that. From the dean over Dr. McKinnon, the commissioner. You didn't cost this, but you've inherited it. The question is, what are you going to do about this? If it takes this much to do, it cannot be ignored, it cannot be swept under the carpet. Very little of this is personal. It is this big because we learn that you have to accept federal code and put it on paper to see. That's the language, not your perspective, not somebody else's thing. It is the official thought. That's a corporate culture. Doesn't matter what level. So it includes 5 acts of Congress, lots of federal and regional regulations, and some state regulations. And there's 9 cases in which the industry got a raw deal, and 9 cases in which elected have not necessarily been given best advice to put in mind that this tragedy should come to an end. It's not a conspiracy story. This was never intended. Nobody wanted it. It happened because the consulting process led up to CFR 651, March 1st, 1994, does on the federal record undone, does on the federal record not include in 58 public comments, nobody with any clue about fishing boat design and catch technology was even asked. So no university was consulted either. So you're only counting fish, and you do this for 31 years, dealing with a wheel upside down situation, which you need to fix.
As the director of DMF.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you want me to do?
I think you and I should sit down in a room full of people.
One thing? What is one thing that I can go home and execute for you?
You and I go to the governor.
One thing. That's the director of the Division Marine Fisheries.
Yeah.
What is that thing?
Push back on a federal level to allow advanced fishing to emerge.
Okay. But you're asking us
Okay.
to affect the federal.
One thing.
I want to do that one thing for you. I want to know what that one thing is.
You and I go to the governor, but she's a lawyer. She knows how to fix bad federal code.
All right, so there's my challenge as director. I've heard your pleas, and I would, I think we have a regulation that talks about, vessel length. We can probably, and horsepower, we could probably tweak that. I don't think any of that's necessary anymore. That's one thing. I don't know that it affects things enough to solve the range of problems that you're describing.
It's not gonna last for 31 years. So
Right, but
no.
but I'd be willing to do anything that I can do.
Yes.
I know you've been on
Let's sit down
campaign for
together
a
and-
very long time.
There's
But I
a lot
wanna-
of solutions in here.
There's a lot in there.
There's a lot of solutions.
I want to, okay.
Great, thank you.
If you have a hard copy, Director Breezes has a hard copy, Commissioner O'Shea has a hard copy.
Thank you very much. So go to one other comment online. So we have, I believe we have one comment online as well.
And I will share with you folks small versions of the big.
Okay, so I think Valerie, we're gonna give you your 2.5 minutes, so over to you.
Thank you very much, Pat. I'm Valerie Nelson. I'm a resident of Gloucester. Some of you may know of me. I'm not an active participant, but I've been listening and learning and trying to help for quite a few years. So I really appreciate the whole morning. I would like to say several things, but start with, I would like to echo Ed Barrett's overall sense of frustration and impatience. And I'll explain this. Because while wonderful things were said about focused investment in the DPAs, including private property, in getting the quotas right and science right so that it's not this erratic up and down that destroys everything, and also great, wonderful focus on blending what's brought in with prices and seafood supply chains and trying to look at. I've been hearing about that stuff, including in all of these meetings in Massachusetts for so many years now. So I want to ask these following questions out of the same Ed Barrett frustration. I hear up in Gloucester, this business is going down, and I would like to ask you, are there ways that you can please think about accelerating action on this stuff? Because these things have been brought up, private property in Gloucester, for years, and yet the system in state government, now I hear deadlines that are so far out that, as Ed said, maybe the industry's done by then. Can you accelerate implementation of all the important ideas of this morning? Number two, I gather that Commerce has an October 14th deadline for recommendations on major science and management approaches. I've been talking to EDA. Commerce has disaster economic resilience. They're interested in the fishing industry. USDA. Is this group voicing an articulated position from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as to what the federal government needs to be doing to invest in the Massachusetts fishing industry? And the third thing I would like to say is that I appreciated hearing about looking to Maine in the investment strategies, but I would add that having looked at some of the sessions in the National Working Waterfront Conference in San Diego, is that everything you mentioned, whether it's seafood supply chains or, innovative, whatever you were mentioning, is that Alaska is a leader, Rhode Island's a leader, Maine is a leader, California is leading. And is there any way that you can learn from what all other kinds of fishing ports and industries are doing in other states? I think that's really fruitful. So thank
Valerie,
you for listening.
and Valerie, if you have further comments, the commission can absolutely take comments in writing and encourage you to do so, because I know there's probably many thoughts that you have.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're gonna let people, we're about 8 minutes over, so we're gonna just let people know about next meeting and call the day. So we do have a special meeting with, I think, the Fisheries Work Group and this group together to spend actually a little bit, it'll all be online, so you have to go anywhere, but we'll be at home, but really on the regional fund administrator, claims process development and design. It's weedy and detailed and they need your feedback. So that's gonna be coming up
It's November 3rd, I believe.
November 3rd online. We'll send people a reminder. We'll really ask if you can be there. I'll try to make sure that you get materials ahead of time so you can look at what they've got so far and really kind of dive into that and give some feedback. Will be really cool. Then our next meeting for this, we have one more meeting this year, I believe in December. We were thinking of coupling with the Fisheries Work Group in New Bedford, which is
December 12th. We haven't sent out that announcement yet, but we will very soon for the Fisheries Working Group. So we just wanted to check in if that's in the morning. Do you all want to do afternoon?
Does that
meeting?
help? Because then it's just not 2 trips.
Mainly nods. Okay.
It is in New Bedford this time, so we did Gloucester last time, so. All right, so we'll do that. All right.
And then we will be convening some of the focus groups.
Yes.
So
Yes.
stay tuned for that.
Yeah, we got plenty of, we've got some things going now, which is really, really good. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for online sticking there with us. Ed, Eric, Aubrey, thank you, everybody, for driving through traffic. All right, please grab the food on the way out. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank
Pat, Abby.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Be well. Bye.